Hi guys. Tonight we're stepping into the deep green birthplace of chocolate, where the air is warm, the leaves shine with rain, and strange ridged pods hang from small trees like lanterns left by sleepy gods. What if the sweet square you nibble today began as a bitter sacred drink, poured for rulers, spirits, and the dead? What if chocolate was once too powerful, too precious, and too mysterious to be treated like a snack around you? Insects hum in the dark branches, damp earth breathes up through your sandals, and somewhere nearby, a clay cup is being lifted with care. So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and comment where you're listening from, along with your local time, because somewhere out there, someone else is drifting into this same ancient forest with you. Now, dim the lights and let your mind walk slowly into the shade. You are standing in a tropical lowland forest of ancient Mesoamerica, long before chocolate becomes a bar, long before it meets sugar, long before anyone thinks to wrap it in shiny paper and sell it beside chewing gum. The trees around you do not look dramatic at first. Cacao trees are modest things, growing beneath taller forest giants, preferring filtered light, warmth, moisture, and the kind of patient humidity that makes your skin feel touched by invisible hands. Their pods grow in an odd way, not from the tips of branches like apples, not dangling politely like pears, but directly from the trunk and older limbs, as if the tree cannot quite decide where fruit belongs. The pods are oval, ridged, and heavy, shifting from green to yellow, red, orange, or purple, depending on variety and ripeness. They look slightly alien, which is fair, because cacao has always seemed to invite exaggeration. You step closer, a worker, or perhaps a family member gathering fruit, takes a blade and cuts one pod open. The sound is soft and woody, a small crack in the wet air. Inside, packed in pale, slippery pulp, are seeds. These seeds are what later worlds will call cacao beans, though they are not true beans in the strict botanical sense. Humanity, being humanity, will ignore this technical detail and continue calling them beans anyway. A very typical decision. The smell is not yet chocolate. That may surprise you. Fresh cacao pulp is fruity, tangy, almost floral, with a sweetness that clings to the fingers. The seeds themselves are bitter and astringent. If you expected the scent of brownies, you would be politely disappointed. Chocolate must be coaxed into existence through fermentation, drying, roasting, grinding, and mixing. It is not simply found. It is made, slowly, by people who learn the moods of heat, time, stone, and taste. This is one of the first quiet truths of chocolate. It is not just a food. It is a relationship between tree and hand, forest and fire, patience and desire. The earliest story is difficult to see clearly because it lies in a mist before full written records. Cacao was native to the Americas, especially the tropical regions connected to what are now southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and nearby lands. Long before famous empires rose, people learned that the seeds inside these pods could be transformed into a drink unlike anything else. Bitter, stimulating, fragrant, and strange. It carried both pleasure and power. Historians still argue whether the earliest users valued cacao first for the sweet pulp around the seeds or for the bitter seeds that became chocolate. It is a lovely uncertainty. Really, you can imagine someone tasting the white pulp first, enjoying its bright flavour, then wondering what could be done with the seeds left behind. Human curiosity has created both civilization and many regrettable soups. In this case, curiosity led to something magnificent. The forest around you rustles. Birds call from hidden perches. The ground is soft, and every step releases the smell of wet leaves. In this world, cacao is not yet casual. It grows in specific regions, needs careful handling, and carries symbolic weight. For later Maya and Aztec societies, cacao will become associated with nobility, ritual, trade, and offerings. But here, at the beginning, you sense something more intimate. A person learns a tree, A family learns a process. A community learns that this bitter seed can gather people together. Picture a clay vessel near a hearth. The drink inside is not smooth like modern hot chocolate. It may be thick, grainy, foamy, spiced, and unsweetened. It might be poured from one vessel into another to raise a froth. Because foam matters. Foam is beauty. Foam is status. Foam is proof that effort has been made. You hear the liquid splash softly, again and again, as hands lift and pour. The surface blooms with bubbles, light catching on them like tiny moons. There is a quirky little detail hidden in the deep history of cacao. Some ancient vessels seem designed not only for drinking, but for showing off the foam. Imagine that. Thousands of years before latte art, someone may already be judging the top layer of a ceremonial beverage. Humanity has always found ways to become dramatic about drinks. The mainstream fact beneath the wonder is clear cacao became deeply important in Mesoamerican cultures, especially among the Maya and later the Aztecs, where it was used in ceremonies, elite feasting, and exchange. But the emotional truth feels even broader. Cacao was valued because it stood at a crossing point. It was agricultural and spiritual, ordinary and rare, bitter and desirable, earthly and divine. You lift the imagined cup. It is warm from the hands that made it, rough along the rim, smelling of a roasted seed, smoke, earth, and something sharp beneath. The first sip is not candy. It wakes the mouth. It makes you sit straighter. There is bitterness, yes, but also depth. A taste like dark soil after rain. A taste like bark, spice, and memory. Your modern tongue might hesitate. Your ancient self might understand immediately. The drink does not comfort in the sugary way you know. It commands attention. It belongs to a world where flavour is not always soft, where sacred things may be challenging, where bitterness can mean strength rather than failure. You feel the warmth slide down, and in the heavy forest air, it seems to join the pulse of insects, leaves, and distant thunder. Around you, the cacao tree keeps growing in the shade, quiet and particular. It does not know that future centuries will carry its seeds across oceans. It does not know that kings, merchants, monks, soldiers, children, advertisers, scientists, and sleepy midnight snackers will all claim it in their own way. For now, it is simply here, rooted in damp soil, holding its pods close to the trunk like secrets, and you remain beside it for a while, breathing slowly. The forest is not silent. It clicks, drips, murmurs, and exhales. Somewhere, someone scrapes pulp from seeds. Somewhere, smoke curls under a dark roof. Somewhere, a cup is prepared for a guest, a ruler, a spirit, or a farewell. Chocolate begins not with sweetness, but with attention. You walk out of the thick green hush and into a world that feels harder to read. A world of river mud, low mounds, carved stone faces, and traces so faint they seem to breathe only when you stop trying to force them into certainty. This is the land of the Olmec, along the Gulf Coast of what is now southern Mexico, where heavy rains feed wetlands and rivers slide slowly through the heat. The air smells of clay, reeds, smoke, and damp wood. Under your feet, the ground gives a little, soft from water and time. Here, history does not speak in long written lines. It murmurs through residues inside pottery, through fragments of vessels, through the shape of settlements, through art that stares back at you with calm, unreadable eyes. The Olmec civilization flourished roughly from the 2nd millennium BCE into the 1st millennium BCE, and its influence spread widely across Mesoamerica. That is the solid fact beneath the mist. They built ceremonial centres, moved enormous basalt stones, carved colossal heads, and helped shape religious and artistic traditions that later cultures would inherit, adapt, and, naturally, make more complicated. You pass near a raised platform where packed earth has hardened beneath centuries of rain. There are no crowds now, no drums, no voices, only the imagined scrape of sandals and the far call of birds. But in your mind, the place fills gently with life. People carry baskets. Children chase one another near cooking fires. A potter turns wet clay between steady palms. The smell of roasting maize drifts through the settlement, warm and dusty, mixing with the green scent of river plants. Somewhere among these ordinary movements or cacao may be present. That little word, matters. It is not as satisfying as a grand announcement, but history is not always generous. Scholars have found chemical traces connected to cacao in ancient vessels from Mesoamerica, and some evidence points back very far indeed. Yet historians still debate how confidently cacao use can be assigned to the Olmec themselves, and whether the drink they prepared would resemble what later peoples recognized as chocolate. The uncertainty is not a failure, it is part of the atmosphere. You're walking through a room where someone has left only the scent of smoke and a cup on the floor. You kneel beside a broken ceramic vessel, its surface rough and cool. Imagine it whole. Perhaps it once held a fermented drink. Perhaps cacao pulp was used before the seeds became the central treasure. Perhaps the people here experimented with fruits, maize, chilies, flowers, honey, and bitter seeds in combinations now lost to us. Ancient kitchens were laboratories without white coats, and, thankfully, without anyone saying the word synergy. The Gulf Coast is warm enough for cacao, but cacao is demanding. It likes shade, moisture, and care. It does not thrive everywhere. This gives it a special character. Anything difficult to grow or obtain can become valuable, not only because it is useful, but because it carries effort inside it. You can almost feel that effort in your hands as you imagine a pod being opened, seeds scooped out, pulp clinging like wet silk. The soundscape is slow and layered. Frogs pulse from pools at dusk, insects soar at the air, a canoe knocks softly against a muddy bank. Stone tools tap, a fire sighs. The world is not silent, but it is not hurried either. Even trade, even ritual, even work seems tied to river rhythm, to rain and dry season, to planting and harvest, to journeys made by foot or canoe. The Olmec are often called a mother culture of Mesoamerica, though that phrase can oversimplify things. Cultures do not give birth like neat family trees in school diagrams. They influence, borrow, transform, and argue silently through objects. Still. Olmec art and ceremonial life clearly mattered to later societies. Their carved monuments show rulers or important figures with powerful faces, downturned mouths, helmets, and expressions that seem both human and more than human. You stand before one of these imagined colossal heads, and it feels as if the stone itself is listening. A quirky tidbit waits here, large enough to be almost funny. Some Olmec colossal heads weigh many tons, and the basalt used for them came from distant sources. People moved those stones without wheels, draft animals, or metal machinery. So yes, before anyone was debating the correct way to froth cacao, someone had already decided that dragging a gigantic boulder through a tropical landscape was a reasonable community project. Humans have always had ambition and sore backs. If cacao was part of this world, it likely belonged not just to taste, but to meaning. In many ancient societies, special drinks helped mark special moments. A bitter, stimulating beverage could accompany ceremonies, elite gatherings, healing practices, or offerings. It could be shared to create obligation, to show rank, to welcome guests, or to speak to beings not visible in daylight. You feel the rim of a clay cup against your fingers. It is heavier than it looks, carries more than liquid. You imagine someone pouring a dark mixture into a vessel. It may not be sweet. It may not even be fully familiar as chocolate. The aroma rises with smoke, wet clay, and crushed plant matter. A hand stirs. The drink thickens. Perhaps it is passed to an elder, a leader, a healer, or a visitor whose friendship matters. Perhaps no one calls it sacred in a dramatic voice. Perhaps they simply treat it with the quiet seriousness people reserve for things that belong to both body and spirit. The landscape presses close. Broad leaves brush your arm, leaving a slick line of moisture on your skin. Mosquitoes whine near your ear, because even the ancient world had no respect for ambience. The river reflects a pale sky. In the distance, ceremonial mounds rise low and deliberate, shaped by hands now gone. What you learn here is patience. Chocolate's history does not begin as a fully lit scene. It begins as evidence gathered in fragments, a puzzle with missing edges. The Olmec world gives you hints, trade, ritual, complex society, tropical ecology, vessels capable of holding special drinks. It gives you enough to lean closer, not enough to claim too much. And so you stand in the Gulf Coast dusk, listening to water move through reeds. The first stars appear above the humid plain. Somewhere, in a house of thatch and packed earth, a pot rests near fading coals. Whether it held cacao pulp, a bitter seed drink, or something still unnamed, it reminds you that history often begins not with certainty, but with a trace, a stain in clay, a taste half remembered, a question warm in the hands. You enter a Maya city at dawn, when stone still holds the coolness of night, and the first smoke rises from household hearths in thin blue ribbons. The plaza opens before you in pale light, wide and quiet for a moment, bordered by stepped temples, platforms, painted walls, and buildings where power has learned to sit very still. The air smells of limestone dust, wet earth, burning wood, and maize cakes warming on clay griddles. Somewhere, a dog barks once, decides that history is not its problem, and goes silent again. You walk slowly across worn stone. Your bare feet feel the faint grit of the surface, the chill fading as the sun climbs. Above you, birds flash through the trees beyond the plaza, bright and quick. The Maya world is not one single kingdom, not one neat empire with a tidy label. It is a landscape of city-states, rival courts, alliances, wars, marriages, markets, farmers, scribes, artists, and priests. From the pre-classic through the classic period and beyond, Maya communities build complex societies across southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. They develop writing, mathematics, astronomy, architecture, and courtly art of astonishing detail. And in this world, cacao becomes visible. You see it painted on vessels. You see it named in glyphs. You see elite drinking cups placed in tombs, as if the dead might still appreciate a proper beverage on the long road ahead. A mainstream fact settles softly into the scene among the classic Maya. Cacao was used in elite feasting, ritual, marriage negotiations, and funerary offerings. It was not just flavour, it was ceremony you could drink. Inside a noble residence shaded from the bright plaza, servants and attendants prepare a cacao drink. The room is dim, cooler than outside, with mats laid on the floor and painted pottery arranged carefully nearby. You smell roasted cacao seeds, crushed maize, chili, flowers, and perhaps vanilla, depending on the region and occasion. The scent is deep, bitter, smoky, and green around the edges. It does not float like modern cocoa. It sits in the air with dignity, as if it has its own little throne. A woman pours liquid from one vessel into another from a practiced height. The stream falls in a dark ribbon, splash, lift, pour again. The goal is foam, that prized, delicate crown. It gathers slowly, pale brown bubbles trembling on the surface. Foam is not decoration only. It is texture, aroma, status, and skill. You can hear the rhythm of pouring, almost like soft rainfall indoors. You watch a lord lift the cup. He is dressed in woven cloth, beads, perhaps jade, perhaps feathers, depending on wealth and setting. He does not gulp. Of course he does not gulp. Nobody wears that much symbolic authority just to chug breakfast. He drinks with intention. The cacao may be bitter, spiced, thickened, and energizing. It wakes the blood. It warms the throat. It gathers the room into a shared moment. Maya scribes sometimes wrote the contents or owner of vessels on the vessels themselves. This is one of the most charmingly human things in ancient history. A cup might effectively announce that it was meant for cacao, or belonged to a particular person. Imagine your favourite mug declaring your name and preferred beverage in elegant hieroglyphs. Slightly grand for tea, perhaps, but one respects the confidence. The painted scenes on some ceramics show nobles seated with cups, attendants presenting goods, musicians performing, and courtly exchanges unfolding with controlled grace. Yet beyond noble walls, cacao's story is broader. Farmers grow cacao in suitable lowland zones, tending trees under shade. Traders carry cacao products across distances. Families may use cacao in social events at different levels of society, though access varies by region, rank, and period. In a world of maize, beans, squash, chili, salt, and fruit, cacao has a special brightness. It is not daily porridge. It is the thing you notice when it appears. You step into a marketplace where the day has grown warmer. Voices overlap. Turkeys complain from woven cages. Baskets of chilies glow red and green. Cotton cloth is folded in stacks. Obsidian blades catch the light. Someone sells tamales wrapped in leaves, and the steam smells comforting enough to distract even a serious historian. Nearby, cacao seeds or prepared cacao goods may change hands, moving from grower to trader to household to court. Value travels in small forms. A scholarly uncertainty rests in this marketplace. Noise researchers continue to discuss how widely cacao was consumed outside elite circles in different Maya periods and regions. Was it mostly a noble drink, or did common households enjoy it more often than surviving art suggests? The evidence leans in different directions depending on place and time. The elite left more painted cups, more tomb offerings, more dramatic objects, because elites are very good at making sure people notice them. Ordinary people left quieter traces. The drink itself carries layers. Cacao may be mixed with maize to create nourishment, with chili for heat, with honey for sweetness when available, with flowers or aromatic plants for scent. The word chocolate as you know it does not belong here in the same way, but the experience does. A prepared cacao beverage, carefully made, socially powerful, sensuous, and memorable. You feel the cup in your hands, warm from the liquid and from the palms that held it before you. The rim is smooth from use. The surface foam touches your upper lip, soft and fleeting. The taste arrives bitter first, then earthy, then alive with spice. At a marriage negotiation, cacao may appear as part of gifts and feasting, helping bind families and futures. At a funeral, vessels for cacao may accompany the dead. Speaking of status, affection, and provision, at a court gathering, it marks hierarchy and hospitality. At a ritual event, it may connect humans to gods, ancestors, and the agricultural forces that hold life together. It is remarkable how one drink can do so much work while simply sitting in a cup. Even the gods seem close. Maya mythology and art connect cacao with fertility, abundance, sacrifice, and rebirth. The cacao tree, with pods growing from its trunk, fits easily into a world where trees can be cosmic, caves can be mouths of the underworld, and maize itself can become a divine body. You stand near painted walls where colour once burned bright, and you sense that food here is never merely food. Maize is life. Cacao is prestige, pleasure, and offering. Eating and drinking are ways of living inside a sacred landscape. By late afternoon, heat gathers on the plaza, stone radiates warmth through your souls, the city hums with work, politics, gossip, prayer, and appetite. A scribe bends over a surface, shaping signs with careful movement. A potter paints curling lines around a vessel that may one day rest in a tomb. A farmer checks young trees in humid shade. A child watches foam rise and wonders whether adults always make such a ceremony out of beverages. The answer, across all human history, is yes, absolutely. As evening lowers, the cacao cup returns to shadow. The last light touches its painted rim. You breathe in smoke, flowers, sweat, and roasted seed. The Maya world has given chocolate a clearer voice, written, painted, poured, shared, and honoured. It is no longer only a mysterious possibility in broken pottery. It is a drink of courts and households, of memory and rank, of gods and guests. You hold that bitter warmth a little longer. Around you, the city settles into night. Frogs begin their pulsing song beyond the walls. A vessel is washed, a fire is fed. Foam vanishes from the cup, as all foam must. But the taste remains, dark and steady on the tongue. You find yourself inside a busy Mesoamerican market, where the morning air is already warm and full of movement. Woven awnings cast broken shade over baskets, jars, folded cloth, heaps of maize, green chilies, red achiote, feathers, salt, gourds, pottery, and little bundles tied with fibre. The ground is packed hard by thousands of feet. Dust rises, then settles on ankles, baskets, and the edges of bright textiles. You hear bargaining everywhere, not as shouting, exactly, but as a steady human music, a price offered, a laugh refused, a counter-offer made with the patience of someone who has done this dance since childhood. You move slowly between stalls, letting the market breathe around you. A woman lifts the lid from a steaming pot, and the smell of tamales comes up soft and comforting. Nearby, a seller fans smoke away from grilled meat. Someone crushes herbs with a stone. Someone else shakes a basket of dried goods so the contents rustle like rain. The air holds sweat, maize, clay, smoke, flowers, and the faint sharpness of cacao. Here, cacao beans are not only ingredients, they are value. You see them in small piles, counted carefully. They are brown, wrinkled, light in the hand, and easy to carry. A buyer tips a few into a palm, a seller watches closely. No one treats them casually. These little seeds can purchase food, tools, small luxuries, and services. In certain Mesoamerican economies, especially among the Maya and later the Mexica, cacao beans functioned as a kind of currency for everyday exchange. They were useful because they were portable, countable, desirable, and consumable. Money you can drink later has a certain charm, though it does create temptation. You pause beside a stall where a turkey shifts its weight in a cage and looks deeply offended by commerce. The seller names a price in cacao beans. Not a vague price, not a handful, more or less, but a counted amount. In some records from the early colonial period, prices were described in cacao a tamal for a small number of beans, a turkey hen for far more, a rabbit for another amount. Exact values shifted by place, time, quality, and circumstance, because markets enjoy being annoying in every century. Still, the principle is clear. Cacao could act like small change. This changes the way you see the bean. It is no longer only sacred drink, elite gift, or ritual offering. It is also practical. It moves through ordinary hands. It buys lunch. It settles debts. It passes between farmer, trader, cook, traveller, and noble household. One bean is tiny, but many beans together become possibility. A pouch of cacao at your waist feels like a purse, a snack, and a social signal all at once. You touch the pouch. The beans press through the woven fabric, hard and uneven. They make a dry clicking sound when you shift your hand. It is a delicate sound, almost private. But in this market, people hear it. They know what it means. A person with cacao can bargain. There is a quirky problem, of course. Because cacao beans were valuable, people sometimes counterfeited them. Imagine someone hollowing out a bean or making a fake from clay, then trying to pass it along in the market with the innocent expression of a person who has absolutely never committed economic mischief. Early Spanish observers later reported tricks involving counterfeit cacao beans, which tells you something delightful and depressing wherever there is money. There is someone trying to fake it. Even tiny chocolate money was not safe from human creativity. You watch a merchant inspect beans with practiced suspicion. He turns them over, checking size, colour, weight, and condition. Some beans are too small, some are shriveled, some may be damaged. Quality matters. Cacao is not a perfect currency because it can rot, be eaten by insects, vary in value, or be consumed by a hungry owner who lacks discipline. But many forms of money have flaws. Metal can be clipped. Paper can be forged. Digital money can vanish behind a forgotten password, which is simply a modern ritual of despair. Cacao, at least, smells better. The market grows louder as the sun rises. A group of traders arrives from another region, their goods bundled on their backs. They carry cotton cloth, obsidian, feathers, salt, shells, and perhaps cacao from warmer lowlands. Trade routes connect ecological zones, allowing products from forest, coast, mountain, and valley to move across distance. This is one of the important historical facts beneath the scene. Cacao's value depended partly on geography. It did not grow everywhere, so places that could produce it gained something others wanted. You follow a trader to the shaded edge of the market. His shoulders are marked by the straps of his load. His skin is damp with sweat. He drinks water, then opens a bundle. Inside are cacao beans, dried and ready for exchange. They carry the memory of orchards far away, of pods cut from trunks, of pulp fermented, of seeds dried under sun. A buyer leans in. The two begin to count. Counting is intimate here. Beans pass in groups, gathered and separated with fingertips. You hear them tick softly against a bowl. The sound is humble, but it holds the tension of value. A wrong count can sour a deal. A spoiled bean can insult a buyer. A generous measure can build trust. Markets are not only places of goods, they are theatres of reputation. Historians still argue about how standardised cacao values were across different regions and periods. Some sources give prices, but those numbers come from particular moments, often after Spanish contact, when local economies were already changing. It is not always safe to project them backward or sideways into every Maya town or Mexican market. You can feel the uncertainty here, woven into the dust. Cacao was money, yes, but money inside living systems, not in a neat chart pinned to a wall. A child watches an adult count beans and learns silently. This is how value becomes culture, not only through law, not only through rulers, but through repetition. How many beans for a meal? How many for a bird? How many for a piece of cloth? When is a bean too poor to accept? When is a seller being ridiculous? These lessons pass through eyes, gestures, jokes and scoldings. You step away from the busier stalls and sit near a wall warmed by sun. The stone is rough against your back. In your palm, one cacao bean rests like a small, dark seed of argument. It is agricultural, edible, spiritual, commercial, and slightly inconvenient. It can become a drink offered to nobles. It can become a payment for dinner. It can be hoarded, gifted, counted, planted, spoiled, or faked. Few objects manage so many careers. The afternoon light turns golden. Market voices soften as some stalls empty. A woman ties up her remaining goods. A man pours counted beans into a pouch and tucks it beneath his clothing. The turkey in the cage remains unconvinced by the entire arrangement. Dust clings to your feet. Smoke threads through the air. You understand now that chocolate's power was not only in temples or palaces. It lived in trade, in bargaining, in the small daily drama of exchange, before coins with kings' faces, before banknotes, before candy bars near cash registers. Cacao already knew how to move desire from one hand to another. You arrive at Tenochtitlan in the clear brightness of morning, and for a moment the city seems to float between water and sky. Causeways stretch across Lake Texcoco. Canoes glide over the canals with soft splashes. White walls, temple steps, painted buildings, busy markets, and rising smoke all shimmer in the thin highland light. The air is cooler than the tropical cacao lands, but it is alive with smell lake water, maize dough, flowers, copal incense, damp reeds, cooked beans, and human ambition warming itself in the sun. This is the great capital of the Mexica, who many people call the Aztecs. It is a city of order and appetite, of ceremony and discipline, of astonishing engineering and very serious paperwork, though the paperwork is painted, counted, remembered, and carried through tribute systems rather than stacked in grey office cabinets. Honestly, a slight improvement. You walk along a causeway toward the heart of the city. Water laps below. Canoes pass with cargo vegetables from Chinampa Gardens. Firewood, fish, woven mats, flowers, cotton, and goods from far beyond the lake. The city itself cannot grow cacao well. The highland climate is not friendly to the delicate tree, and yet cacao is everywhere in desire, in value, in elite consumption, in tribute lists, and in the minds of rulers who understand that rare things can make power taste richer. A mainstream historical fact settles clearly here. The Mexica Empire received cacao beans as tribute from warmer regions under its influence or control. Cacao moved from lowland producers toward the imperial centre, where it entered storehouses, noble households, ritual settings, and markets. You can picture the movement not as one neat line, but as a web of obligation. People in distant provinces harvest, dry, pack, transport, record, deliver, and surrender. In the capital, officials count. You enter a tribute storehouse, cool and shadowed compared with the sun outside. Bundles are stacked with care, cotton mantles, feathers, warrior costumes, shields, maize, beans, precious stones, and cacao all speak the language of empire. The room smells of fibre, dust, dried plants, and the deep bitter scent of stored cacao. Your fingers brush a sack. Inside. The beans shift with a muted dry whisper, each one small enough to ignore, thousands together impossible to dismiss. Tribute is not just tax, it is a performance of domination. Every delivery says the centre reaches you. The ruler's hunger stretches beyond the lake. The empire can drink what does not grow in its own soil. That is the quiet arrogance of imperial taste. Cacao becomes more than nourishment. It becomes proof that distant landscapes bend toward Tenochtitlan. You step back into sunlight and hear drums from a ceremonial precinct. The sound is steady, not frantic, rolling across stone like a heartbeat made public. Copal incense burns nearby, sweet, resinous, and cloudy. People move in ordered streams. Priests, nobles, warriors, merchants, servants, and visitors each carry their own marks of place. Clothing, posture, jewels, hair, and goods tell stories before anyone speaks. Among nobles and warriors, cacao drinks carry prestige. They may be served cold or warm, plain or flavoured, mixed with flowers, chili, vanilla, honey, or other ingredients depending on occasion and availability. Some accounts from the early colonial period describe Mexican elites drinking cacao after meals, served in fine cups, sometimes with foam carefully raised. It is not the soft bedtime cocoa of a rainy evening. It is darker, sharper, more formal. It stands upright in the mouth. You are invited into a noble residence, or at least allowed to imagine yourself politely not knocking things over. Mats line the floor. Painted vessels rest nearby. Servants prepare a cacao drink, grinding roasted seeds on a stone matat. The sound is low and rhythmic scrape. Press, scrape, press. The stone warms under friction. The paste darkens, releasing a smell like roasted earth, smoke, bitterness, and faint fruit. Water is added. Spices may follow. The liquid is poured, lifted, poured again. Foam gathers. A warrior receives a cup. His hands are calloused. His cloak carries signs of rank. He drinks slowly. Cacao is associated in Mexican culture with strength, nobility, and privilege. It is said that rulers and warriors valued it, not because it gave magical invincibility, sadly, but because it was energizing, costly, and symbolically powerful. The drink contains compounds that stimulate the body. The social meaning stimulates the ego. Between the two, one can see the appeal. You think of Moctezuma, the famous Mexican ruler at the time of Spanish arrival. Later accounts describe enormous quantities of cacao prepared for his household. Although historians treat some numbers with caution, because conquerors and chroniclers had a talent for making everything sound either fabulous or horrifying, depending on the lesson they wanted to teach. Still, the broad picture remains convincing. Cacao was deeply tied to elite life in Tenochtitlan. Here comes a quirky tidbit, almost too theatrical to resist. Some European accounts claimed Moctezuma drank cacao before visiting his wives, implying the beverage had romantic or virility-enhancing powers. Whether this reflects Mexican belief, Spanish imagination, or the ancient human habit of turning expensive foods into bedroom rumours is not entirely clear. Apparently, even in the 16th century, luxury marketing knew where to aim. Historians still argue whether cacao's role among the Mexica should be understood primarily as luxury drink, ritual substance, currency, tribute commodity, medicinal stimulant, or political symbol. The answer may be all of these, but the balance matters. Different sources emphasize different uses, and many descriptions were filtered through Spanish observers who did not always understand what they were seeing. You feel that uncertainty in the room, like smoke that refuses to rise in a straight line. You walk into the great market of Tlatelolco, vast, loud, and astonishingly organized. Thousands gather here. Goods are arranged by type. Officials supervise. Prices are watched. Disputes are judged. The smell is overwhelming, and strangely beautiful fish from the lake. Tortillas on hot clay, crushed herbs, flowers, leather, salt, sweat, and cacao. You hear vendors call, buyers answer, sandals scrape, baskets thump, children chatter, dogs sniff hopefully, and somewhere a man explains why his goods are obviously superior to everyone else's. Some things do not change. Cacao beans pass through this market as money and merchandise. They are counted for small purchases, traded in bulk, and guarded against fraud. Their value rests not only in imperial demand, but in ordinary trust. A bean must be acceptable. A measure must be recognized. A seller must believe the buyer's pouch contains real worth, not cleverly disguised nonsense. At dusk, the city turns copper. The lake reflects smoke and temple silhouettes. Canoes return along darkening canals. In a noble courtyard, a final cup of cacao is poured, its foam pale against the deep liquid. You hold it in your hands. The vessel is warm from preparation, smooth at the rim, painted with care. The scent rises slowly: roasted seed, chilly heat, flowers, and smoke. You take a sip. It is bitter, energizing, and ceremonial. It tastes of forests far away, of tribute roads, of counted sacks, of rulers who collect what their land cannot grow. It tastes of power made drinkable. Around you, Tenochtitlan settles into night with lamps, voices, drums, and water moving quietly through canals. The cacao bean has climbed from tree to tribute, from market to palace, from field labour to imperial appetite. In this city of stone, water and command. Chocolate is no longer simply precious. It is political. You stand at the edge of a meeting neither side fully understands, where sea-worn strangers in metal and wool face people whose world is older, richer, and far less simple than the strangers can yet imagine. The air is tense with ceremony. Feathers shimmer. Cloth moves in the breeze. Armour catches the sun with a cold blink. Somewhere nearby, a cup of cacao is being prepared, and it may be the most important object in the room that no one from Europe properly respects yet. The Spanish arrive with hunger in many forms. Hunger for gold, land, souls, status, explanations, and dinner. They bring horses, steel, ships, guns, diseases, priests, scribes, and that particular European confidence that can look at an entire civilization and think, charming. But what is it worth? They also bring their own habits of taste: wine, wheat bread, olive oil, pork, garlic, stews, vinegar, spices from older trade routes. Their mouths are trained by another world. Then they meet cacao. You watch as a dark drink is offered in a fine vessel. It has foam on top, raised by careful pouring. The liquid smells earthy, bitter, smoky, and spiced. Nothing like the sweet chocolate you know. There is no milk. There is no mountain of sugar. There is no whipped cream floating above it like a cloud that got lost in a dessert shop. Instead, this is a serious drink made from roasted and ground cacao, water, and often flavourings such as chili, flowers, or vanilla. It is strong in personality. It does not ask to be liked. A Spaniard lifts the cup. Perhaps he's curious, perhaps suspicious, perhaps trying to be polite while secretly wondering whether this is medicine, soup, or a test of courage. He tastes it. The first impression is probably not love. The bitterness lands quickly. The texture may seem thick or gritty. The foam touches the lip. The chili, if present, warms the mouth in a way that confuses anyone expecting a familiar drink. The scent of roasted seed rises with smoke and flowers. Around him, local hosts understand the social meaning of the exchange. To receive cacao can be an honour. To drink badly, refuse rudely, or misunderstand the moment would be unfortunate. So he swallows, because empire may be brutal, but manners at a reception are still complicated. A mainstream historical fact is clear here. Spanish observers in the 16th century encountered cacao as a valued Mesoamerican drink and as a form of exchange. Early accounts noticed both its importance and its strangeness. They saw cacao beans used in markets, tribute and elite consumption. Yet the drink itself challenged European expectations. It was not wine. It was not ale. It was not broth. It was a bitter, stimulating beverage with cultural meanings attached so densely that a foreigner could taste only the surface. You move into the Spanish camp or lodging space, where men speak in low voices after the formal encounter. Leather creaks, metal is unbuckled. Sweat dries inside wool clothing entirely unsuited to the climate, because apparently suffering for fashion and empire was non-negotiable. Someone describes the drink as nourishing. Another calls it strange. A priest wonders whether it has medicinal uses. A soldier wonders whether it can be traded. A hungry man wonders whether there is anything else to eat. The smell of cacao lingers in the cup, but now it mixes with horses, damp leather, iron, smoke, and human uncertainty. You can feel the rough wood of a table beneath your fingers, the heavy warmth of the room, the restless shifting of men who know they are far from home. On the other side of the cultural divide, cacao is understood through local systems of nobility, tribute, ritual, and exchange. On this side, it is becoming a question: what is this thing, and can Europe use it? Historians still debate how quickly Spanish newcomers acquired a taste for cacao and how much indigenous preparation shaped early colonial chocolate habits. Some accounts suggest resistance at first. Others show rapid adoption, especially once sweeteners and familiar spices entered the cup. Taste is never purely personal. It is trained by culture, adjusted by power, and sometimes bullied by sugar until it agrees to cooperate. You follow an interpreter, perhaps indigenous, perhaps Spanish-trained, perhaps moving uneasily between worlds. Words for cacao, chocolate drinks, vessels, foam, tribute, and value pass from one language into another, losing edges along the way. Translation is not a clean bridge. It is more like crossing a river on wet stones while carrying a basket of eggs. Meaning slip. The word that will become chocolate itself likely comes through indigenous languages, though scholars still argue about its exact origin and route. That uncertainty hums quietly in the background. Is it from Nahuatl forms? Was it shaped by Maya terms? Did Spanish ears reshape sounds they did not fully grasp? The name travelled as the drink travelled, and like many travellers, it changed clothes. Now you enter a colonial kitchen in the first generations after contact. The room is smoky, busy, and full of women's labour, much of it indigenous or African, much of it under conditions of coercion that polite recipes later prefer not to mention. Cacao seeds are roasted on a flat surface. They crackle softly, their shells loosen, the smell deepens, becoming closer to something your modern senses recognise, though still rougher, darker, less sweet. Hands winnow, grind, mix, and pour. Spanish colonists begin adapting cacao to their own tastes. Sugar, increasingly available through brutal plantation systems, changes everything. Cinnamon, anise, and other spices enter the drink. Vanilla, native to the Americas, may remain part of the flavour world. The bitter sacred drink is not simply replaced, but transformed through colonial appetite. Europe does not discover chocolate in the innocent sense. Europe encounters it, misunderstands it, sweetens it, commercializes it, and eventually congratulates itself, because that is often how empire writes recipes. A quirky tidbit appears in the kitchen. Some Europeans initially considered chocolate suspicious because it was both food and drink. Was it nourishment? Was it medicine? Was it luxury? Could it be taken during religious fasting? The answer would keep theologians and moralists busy, because apparently even a cup of cacao needed paperwork for the soul. You hear the grinding stone again, steady and intimate. Scrape, press, scrape, press. The paste grows smooth under practiced hands. The worker's palms shine with oil from the cacao. Warm stone presses heat into the mixture. The aroma rises: bitter cacao, sweet sugar, spice, smoke, and sweat. This is where worlds meet, though not equally. Indigenous knowledge makes the drink possible. Spanish demand redirects it. Colonial systems begin to widen its reach. You taste the adapted cup. It is still darker than modern hot chocolate, but the sugar softens its edges, cinnamon warms it. Foam remains valued, though methods may shift. The drink enters Spanish colonial households, then travels across the Atlantic. It carries with it the memory of Mesoamerican ceremonies, the violence of conquest, the skill of unnamed preparers, and the charm of sweetness. A complicated cup, to say the least. Outside, the evening air cools slightly, bells may ring from a church, indigenous voices continue in streets and courtyards. Spanish voices answer. Somewhere, cacao beans are counted as payment. Somewhere, a priest drinks chocolate while deciding whether it counts as breaking a fast. A theological crisis that seems less urgent if you are the person grinding it. You hold the cup in both hands. The ceramic is warm. The liquid smells familiar and unfamiliar at once. This is the first European shock. Not a single dramatic sip, but a slow disturbance. Cacao unsettles categories. It is bitter but desirable, indigenous but soon fashionable abroad, sacred yet commercial, energizing yet soothing. A drink that Europeans first struggle to understand will become one they cannot stop wanting. Night gathers, the cup empties. At the bottom, a dark sediment clings to the clay. It looks ordinary, almost humble. But inside that residue is a future of courtly rituals, ocean trade, plantation labour, factory machines, candy counters, and private cravings. For now, all of that waits quietly in the bitter taste left on the tongue. You step into a colonial kitchen where the air is warmer than the courtyard outside, thick with smoke, spice, and the steady labour of hands. Morning light enters through a small opening and falls across grinding stones, clay vessels, copper pots, baskets of cacao, and cones of dark sugar. The walls hold the smell of many meals: roasted maize, old ash, dried chilies, damp wood, and cacao oil cling to the room like memory. Here, chocolate begins to change its character. A woman sits near the metat, the broad grinding stone worn smooth by years of work. Her palms know the motion before thought arrives. Roasted cacao seeds are cracked, shelled, and placed on the stone. The mano moves back and forth with a heavy whisper. Press, drag, gather, press again. The cacao warms under friction and releases its fat, turning from broken bits into a shining paste. The scent deepens. It is bitter, roasted, slightly fruity, almost smoky. It fills your nose slowly, then stays there. Beside the cacao rests sugar. This is one of the great turning points in chocolate's history, when European colonists and colonial households began combining cacao with sugar and spices. The old bitter beverage shifted into something more pleasing to European palates. The transformation was not instant, tidy, or innocent. Sugar carried its own enormous history, bound to plantations, forced labour, Atlantic trade, and the brutal hunger of the empires. But in the cup, sugar performed a simple magic. It softened bitterness. It rounded sharp edges. It made cacao easier for newcomers to desire. You watch dark sugar being shaved or broken from a cone. The sound is dry and crisp. Granules fall into a bowl like tiny stones. Cinnamon is added, warm and woody. Perhaps anise joins. Perhaps vanilla. Perhaps achiote for colour, depending on region, taste, and household custom. Every ingredient brings another geography into the room. Cacao from humid groves, sugar from cane fields, cinnamon from Asian trade networks, vanilla from American orchids. The cup becomes a map, though no one sipping it politely in a parlour will necessarily admit how crowded that map is. A servant heats water. Steam clouds the air and dampens your face. The cacao paste is mixed, stirred, dissolved, beaten, poured. Foam still matters, but tools and preferences begin to vary. Some households use wooden stirrers, including the molinillo in Spanish-American settings, rolled between the palms to whip air into the liquid. It makes a soft, rattling hum in the vessel, a cosy sound, almost like a small creature purring in a very serious pot. A quirky tidbit lives inside this tool. The molinillo's carved rings and loose wooden collars are designed to help create foam, which means someone looked at a cup of chocolate and thought, this is good. But what it needs is engineering, a noble human impulse. Slightly excessive. Very useful. The drink is poured into a cup. You lift it. The vessel is warm against your fingers, and the surface trembles beneath a crown of bubbles. The first scent is now sweeter. Not candy sweet. Not yet, but softened. The cacao remains earthy and bitter underneath, like a dark voice under a lighter melody. Cinnamon rises at the edges. Sugar thickens the body of the drink. When it touches your tongue, it feels both old and new. This is the beginning of chocolate's colonial reinvention. In elite Spanish households in the Americas, chocolate becomes fashionable. Served in the morning, during visits, at social gatherings, and sometimes in bed to people who clearly understood comfort at a professional level. It appears in cups and special serving vessels carried carefully on trays. It becomes polite, desirable, expensive, and intimate. To offer chocolate can mean hospitality. To drink it can mean refinement. To own the tools for making it can signal status. Yet the kitchen reminds you that refinement has workers behind it. Someone roasts, someone grinds, someone carries water, someone cleans the sticky residue from vessels. Chocolate's smoothness is built on physical labour, mostly performed by women, indigenous servants, enslaved Africans, and mixed communities whose names rarely survive in grand histories. The drink becomes elegant upstairs because bodies work downstairs, or beside the hearth, or in plantation fields far beyond the house. Historians still argue over exactly when sweetened chocolate became widely preferred among Spanish consumers, and how much of that change came from European taste rather than indigenous adaptation within colonial life. Some indigenous communities also used sweeteners and flavourings, and colonial foodways were never one-way streets. Recipes moved through households, marriages, convents, markets, and servants' knowledge. Chocolate changed because people of many backgrounds changed it together, though not under equal conditions. You pass from the kitchen into a courtyard, where the sound of grinding fades behind you. A fountain murmurs, orange blossoms perfume the air. A woman in fine clothing receives a cup on a small tray. She sips slowly, perhaps with the elegant seriousness of someone pretending not to enjoy something very much. Nearby, another guest remarks on the thickness, the spice, the quality of the cacao. Chocolate becomes conversation. It creates a pause in the day, a small ritual of warmth and alertness. The cup travels across the Atlantic in ships packed with goods, letters, officials, missionaries, and longing. Cacao enters Spain first through imperial connections, moving from colonial habit into courtly fashion. At first, it is still strange enough to require explanation. Then, as sugar and spice reshape it, it becomes desirable enough to require supply. That is how many luxuries conquer a society: first curiosity, then habit, then expectation, then outrage when the household has run out. You imagine a Spanish noble household on a cool morning. The room smells of wax, wool, perfume, and heated chocolate. A servant brings a cup with care. The drink is thick, fragrant, and costly. It warms the hands in a climate far from cacao groves. Outside, church bells echo in stone streets. Inside, someone takes a sip and feels both comfort and distinction. The exotic has been domesticated, but not entirely. A trace of its origins remains in the bitterness beneath the sugar. Chocolate also enters religious houses, where nuns and monks help refine recipes, prepare it for patrons, and debate its proper use. Convents in Spanish America become important centres of culinary creativity. In tiled kitchens and quiet cloisters, chocolate is mixed with nuts, spices, sugar, and local techniques. You can smell it there too, mingling with incense, starch, clean linen, and candle smoke. Sacred discipline and culinary pleasure sit very close together, pretending not to notice each other. The sweetened cup carries contradictions. It is comforting, yet tied to conquest. It is refined, yet born from rough grinding. It is European fashion, yet dependent on American knowledge. It is consumed slowly in polished rooms, yet its ingredients have crossed violent systems of labour and trade. Chocolate becomes delicious, and that is partly the danger. Sweetness can make history easier to swallow. Evening settles over the colonial city, the kitchen cools, a last pot is rinsed, The stone matete remains dark with cacao stains. Smooth from use, patient as sleep, you touch it lightly and feel the roughness along its edge. The room is quiet now, but it still holds the day's aroma: roasted seed, sugar, cinnamon, smoke, and human effort. In this warm silence, chocolate has crossed a threshold. The sacred bitter drink has not vanished, but it has gained new clothing. Sugar has entered the cup and changed the future. The world will learn to crave the softened bitterness, to call it elegant, medicinal, romantic, energizing, harmless, necessary. A small sweetness has opened a very large door. You drift into a monastery corridor where the stones have cooled from the night, and every footstep seems to return softer than it arrived. The walls are thick, the windows are small. A pale line of morning light rests along the floor like folded linen. Somewhere beyond the cloister, a bell rings once, slow and clear, then leaves the air trembling. The smell is a careful mixture of beeswax, damp stone, old wood, ink, wool robes, and, from a nearby room, the unmistakable warmth of chocolate. The scent feels almost mischievous here. This is a house built for discipline, prayer, fasting, reading, silence, and obedience. And yet behind one door, cacao is being roasted, ground, mixed, sweetened, and poured. The contradiction is not loud. It is gentle, domestic, and deeply human. People may renounce worldly excesses, but they still have tongues. History is full of such little negotiations. You enter a kitchen used by religious women or men in the Spanish world, perhaps in Europe, perhaps in the Americas. The hearth glows low, a pot sits near the heat, a wooden whisk waits beside a vessel. The chocolate is thick and dark, sweetened with sugar and scented with cinnamon or vanilla. Steam rises in faint curls, touching your face with moist warmth. A hand rolls the whisk between the palms, and the liquid answers with a soft, hollow flutter. Foam gathers on the surface, delicate and fragrant. Chocolate's place in religious life became surprisingly complicated. One mainstream historical fact is that early modern Catholic thinkers debated whether drinking chocolate broke ecclesiastical fasting rules. Fasting often restricted solid food, but liquids occupied a more flexible category. Chocolate, inconveniently, was both liquid and nourishing. It slipped between definitions with the quiet confidence of a student who has found a loophole in the assignment. You sit near a wooden table where a friar, priest, nun, physician, or moralist might have argued the matter. The tabletop feels polished by sleeves and elbows. Papers lie nearby, weighted with a small stone. Ink dries slowly in the cool air. The question seems simple. At first, does chocolate count as food? But nothing that involves appetite, religion, and status stays simple for long. Some argued that because chocolate was a drink, it did not break a fast. Others replied that it nourished the body too much to be treated like water. Add sugar, eggs, milk, or thickening ingredients, and the matter grew even more suspicious. Was a thin cacao drink acceptable, but a rich one sinful? Could the wealthy sip their way through fasting days while calling it devotion? You can almost hear a stern voice muttering, "How convenient." There is a quirky story often repeated from colonial Mexico. A bishop who objected to women drinking chocolate during Mass was supposedly poisoned by chocolate itself. The tale is dramatic, morally satisfying, and perhaps too neat. It has the shape of gossip wearing a clerical robe. Whether true or embroidered, it reveals something real. Chocolate had become powerful enough to provoke complaint, satire, and scandal. The drink also lived in medicine. Early modern, European, and colonial physicians worked within humoral theory, the old system that imagined health as a balance of hot, cold, wet, and dry qualities. Foods and drinks were judged by how they affected the body's internal balance. Cacao could be classified in different ways depending on preparation. Some considered it warming, others emphasized its fatness, its stimulation, its ability to nourish or comfort. Add spices, and the medical meaning changed again. Add sugar, and sweetness entered the argument wearing a physician's hat. You walk into an apothecary, where shelves hold jars of roots, resins, dried flowers, powders, seeds, and substances with names that sound like they belong in a wizard's pantry. The air smells sharp and dusty lavender, vinegar, dried orange peel, camphor, old paper, and cacao. A practitioner measures ingredients with careful fingers. Chocolate might be prescribed for weakness, digestion, mood, or recovery. It might be recommended to warm the stomach, build strength, or carry other medicines into the body. Of course, medical confidence in every century has its theatrical side. One doctor praises chocolate as strengthening, another warns it may inflame passions, a third adjusts the recipe and declares the problem solved. The patient, meanwhile, is probably pleased to receive medicine that tastes like spiced chocolate rather than boiled bark. A rare victory for the sick room. Historians continue to disagree about how much early medical enthusiasm for chocolate came from observed bodily effects, and how much came from elite fashions seeking respectable language for pleasure. That uncertainty matters. People often wrap desire in virtue, a costly cup becomes restorative, a habit becomes necessary for health, a luxury becomes recommended by experts. The past did not have wellness influencers with ring lights, but it did have persuasive doctors and very comfortable clients. In convents, chocolate could become both work and art. Nuns in the Spanish world prepared sweets, drinks, and spiced chocolate mixtures for patrons, benefactors, and their own communities. The kitchen might be quiet, but never idle. You hear copper pots being moved, almonds being crushed, sugar being pounded, cacao being ground. The smell is heavenly in the most literal and least obedient sense. It mingles with chapel incense, making the entire building seem unsure whether it is praying or baking. You stand near a nun at the grinding stone. Her sleeves are rolled back, her hands are strong. The cacao paste shines under the stone, dark and oily. Sugar scrapes as it is added. Cinnamon dust clings to the air, tickling your nose. Outside, the cloister garden holds herbs, orange trees, and a small fountain murmuring to itself. Inside, labour turns ingredients into comfort, gift, income, and reputation. Chocolate also appears in courtly rooms where priests and physicians advise noble households. A lady may drink it in the morning for strength. A gentleman may take it after travel. A cleric may sip it during long study. A patient may be told it restores the spirits. The cup passes through social categories easily. It is medicine when needed, refreshment when desired, luxury when displayed, and temptation when criticized. You lift a cup in a quiet chamber. It is thicker than tea, richer than broth, and more fragrant than most medicines deserve to be. The heat warms your fingers through porcelain or glazed ceramic. The surface foam brushes your lip. The taste is sweet, bitter, spiced, and soothing, with a faint graininess that reminds you it was made by hand. In the silence, the drink feels almost contemplative. It asks you to slow down. This is why the debates mattered. Chocolate created a pause. It nourished without requiring a meal. It comforted without admitting indulgence too loudly. It stimulated the mind and body while pretending to be modest. For people bound by rules of fasting, prayer, rank, illness, and etiquette, chocolate offered a small, warm loophole. Evening comes to the monastery and shadows lengthen across the cloister. The bell rings again, lower now, calling bodies back to order. The kitchen fire dims. A cup is rinsed. A physician's note dries beside an unfinished argument. Somewhere, someone insists chocolate is harmless. Somewhere else, someone is not convinced. You breathe in the last of the scent, sugar and cacao fading into wax and stone. In this world of discipline, chocolate has learned to speak the languages of medicine, theology, and comfort. It does not shout. It waits in a cup, warm, persuasive, and very difficult to refuse. You enter a European palace through a doorway polished by generations of servants, courtiers, ambassadors, and people pretending not to hurry. The air is cool at first, carrying the smell of waxed floors, perfume, wool, old tapestries, and faint smoke from distant hearths. Then, from a private chamber, comes another scent, darker and warmer chocolate, sweetened, spiced, and lifted carefully into the manners of the court. Here, chocolate becomes theatre. Not the loud theatre of painted stages and comic masks, but the softer theatre of status. Who serves it? Who receives it? Which cup is used? How thick is the drink? How fine is the porcelain? How slowly does one sip while saying something devastating about a rival's hat? These details matter. In elite Europe, especially in Spain and later France, Italy, Austria, and other courtly circles, chocolate becomes a luxury beverage connected with refinement, wealth, and fashionable taste. You stand inside a Spanish aristocratic room in the 17th century. Heavy curtains dim the morning light. A brazier warms the air. A small table has been prepared, and on it rests a chocolate pot, cups, saucers, spoons, and perhaps little cakes or breads for dipping. The chocolate is not served casually from a kitchen pot. It arrives with ceremony, carried by a servant whose steps are measured and quiet. The cup may sit in a mancerina, a special saucer with a raised holder designed to keep the cup steady. That detail is wonderfully specific. The mancerina is said to have become popular because chocolate was often served in delicate cups, and nobody wanted their costly drink sliding across a saucer into their lap. A tiny invention to protect dignity from hot liquid. Civilization advances in noble ways. You take the cup in your hands. It is warm, smooth, and expensive. The liquid inside is thick and fragrant, its surface glistening with a light foam. Sugar has softened the cacao, but not erased it. Cinnamon warms the scent. Vanilla may hover in the background. The first sip coats the tongue with richness. It feels less like a drink than a velvet curtain slowly closing. Chocolate first became fashionable in Spain through colonial connections, but from there it travelled through marriages, diplomacy, religious networks, noble households, and trade. European courts loved imported luxuries. They loved things that could be consumed as symbols. Chocolate was perfect. It was exotic, costly, difficult to prepare well, and suitable for private ritual. Unlike wine, which belonged to older European habits, chocolate carried the glamour of distance. You move to France, where court culture polishes everything until even breakfast seems political. In the world of royal apartments and noble salons, chocolate is served in the morning or at intimate gatherings. It can be praised as nourishing, fashionable, even romantic. It arrives in porcelain cups from expanding global trade networks, sometimes painted with blue designs, flowers, or gilded edges. Silver chocolate pots gleam in candlelight, their long handles and hinged lids made for controlled pouring. Special tools create foam, because a flat cup is apparently a moral disappointment. The room around you rustles. Silk skirts brush the floor. Heeled shoes click softly. A fire snaps under a carved mantel. Someone laughs behind a fan. The smell of powder, orange blossom, and chocolate mingles in the air. You feel the upholstery beneath your fingers, embroidered and slightly rough. Outside the windows, gardens lie in geometric obedience. Inside, appetite is dressed as elegance. A mainstream historical fact sits in this polished room by the 17th and 18th centuries. Chocolate had become a fashionable elite beverage in several European countries, particularly among aristocrats and wealthy urban households. It was expensive because cacao and sugar required long supply chains, and because the proper equipment, preparation, and serving style added layers of exclusivity. In other words, you were not merely drinking chocolate, you were drinking access. You pass into an Italian court, where chocolate joins a rich culture of elaborate banquets, medicinal recipes, and refined confectionery. Italian cooks and physicians experiment with flavours and textures. Chocolate may be scented with jasmine, ambergris, musk, citrus, or flowers. Some combinations sound delicate, others sound like someone lost a bet in an apothecary. But experimentation is part of luxury. The wealthy often enjoy proving they can afford unusual decisions. A quirky tidbit from this age is that chocolate recipes sometimes included animal-derived perfumes such as ambergris or musk, prized in tiny amounts for their exotic aroma. To modern taste, this may feel surprising, perhaps even alarming. Yet early modern elites loved intense scent as much as taste. A cup could be fragrant, medicinal, sensual, and expensive all at once. Subtlety was not always the point. Historians still argue how widely chocolate filtered from courtly spaces into broader urban society before the age of industrial production. Some evidence shows chocolate houses, merchants, and wealthy professionals adopting the drink beyond royal circles. Yet cost remained a barrier, and many ordinary Europeans would have known chocolate more by reputation than regular experience. Surviving objects tend to come from people rich enough to own beautiful objects, which makes history sound better dressed than it often was. You walk through a London drawing room where chocolate competes with coffee and tea for attention. Each beverage has a personality. Coffee is alert, argumentative, and slightly impatient. Tea is polite, social, and increasingly domestic. Chocolate is rich, intimate, and a bit indulgent. The sort of drink that lounges on cushions and insists it is medicinal. In wealthy homes, it may be served with breakfast, after rising, or during visits. It warms the hands during damp mornings and gives conversation a sweet seriousness. The preparation remains laborious. Cacao must be roasted, ground, formed into cakes or paste, then scraped or dissolved into hot water or milk depending on local preference and period. Sugar and spices are added. The drink is beaten to a foam. Servants do the hard work, while elites discuss the flavour as though elegance has floated down from heaven. You stand near the kitchen door and hear the difference between rooms in one. Soft voices and porcelain in the other. Fire, grinding, steam, and tired arms. The touch of court chocolate is luxurious. The cup warms your fingers without burning them. The porcelain lip is thin. The liquid moves slowly. Thicker than coffee, heavier than tea, it leaves a ring on the inside of the cup, a dark trace of wealth. You sip, and for a moment the room seems quieter. Chocolate has a way of creating inwardness, even in public. But the courtly cup is not innocent. It rests on colonial trade, plantation sugar, cacao from distant lands, and the labour of people mostly absent from the painted scenes of elegant consumption. Palace chocolate is beautiful, but beauty can be very skilled at hiding its foundations. The silver pot shines so brightly that it almost distracts from the fields, ships, and forced work behind it. Still, inside the chamber, the ritual continues. A servant pours, a noble accepts, a visitor admires, a recipe is copied, a taste becomes a fashion, and fashion becomes expectation. Chocolate has now learned the languages of rank porcelain, silver, etiquette, privacy, flirtation, medicine, and display. Night settles over the palace. Candles soften the walls. The last cups are carried away, leaving the room scented faintly with spice and wax. You stand beside the cooling hearth and listen to the small sounds of luxury being cleared spoon against saucer, lid against pot, silk retreating down a corridor. Chocolate has entered the courts of Europe, not as a simple drink, but as a performance of power made sweet enough to sip. You step from private rooms into the louder world of public drinking, where polished manners loosen, chairs scrape, dice rattle, newspapers crackle, and every cup seems to carry an opinion. The street outside is damp with recent rain. Wheels splash through mud. A bell rings somewhere beyond the roofs. Coal smoke hangs low over the city, mixing with the smell of horses, wet wool, bread ovens, and the sharp, inviting aromas of coffee, tea, and chocolate. You enter a chocolate house in early modern Europe, perhaps in London, perhaps in another busy city where imported beverages have become fashionable enough to gather men with money, ambition, and far too much confidence in their own judgments. The room is warm, smoky, and crowded. Candles glow through a haze. Wooden tables are marked by cups, cards, ink stains, and elbows. The floor feels uneven beneath your shoes. Someone laughs too loudly. Someone whispers as if the fate of the kingdom depends on a rumour about a minister's mistress. It might. Honestly, politics has survived on worse. Chocolate in this setting is no longer only a noble pleasure served behind closed doors. It is part of a new culture of public sociability. In the 17th and 18th centuries, European cities developed coffee houses, chocolate houses, and tea rooms where people gathered to drink, read, gamble, debate, and exchange news. Coffee became famous as the drink of alert argument, but chocolate had its own public life, especially among wealthier patrons who appreciated its richness and status. You sit at a table near the wall. The wood is sticky beneath your fingertips, warmed by spilled drinks and human company. A servant brings a cup of chocolate, thick and fragrant. Steam rises into the candle smoke. Its scent is sweeter than coffee, heavier than tea, with cacao, sugar, spice, and warm milk in some places, or water in others. The cup warms your palms. The first sip coats the mouth, comforting and stimulating at once. Around you, information moves faster than carriages. Newspapers and pamphlets pass from hand to hand. Men discuss trade, war, elections, royal scandal, shipping news, prices, theatre, philosophy, and which acquaintance has ruined himself through gambling this week. Public drinking houses help form what scholars often call a public sphere, a space where news and opinion circulate beyond court and church. That is the mainstream historical fact at the heart of the rooms, and chocolate houses and coffee houses became important gathering places for urban discussion. Commerce, politics, and sociability. Of course, the word public has limits. These spaces are often male-dominated and class-marked. Entry depends on money, location, reputation, and sometimes political connection. The public sphere is not exactly the entire public. It is more like a noisy room where certain people congratulate themselves for being everyone. Still, the shift matters. Chocolate leaves the exclusively private chamber and joins the urban conversation. A man at the next table unfolds a paper and reads a line aloud. 3 others object before he finishes. Across the room, someone places a bet. Cards slap against the table. Coins clink. Cups are refilled. Chocolate houses in London became associated not only with politics and news, but also with gambling and elite clubs. Some establishments grew famous as meeting places for particular factions or social circles. They were places to see and be seen, to hear rumours early, to lose money quickly, and to pretend the loss was part of a strategy. A quirky tidbit lives in this smoky world. Some famous British gentlemen's clubs began as chocolate or coffee houses. White's, one of London's elite clubs, developed from a chocolate house founded in the late 17th century. Imagine beginning with hot chocolate and ending with centuries of aristocratic exclusivity. That is quite a career path for a beverage. You listen as political language thickens in the air. Some men favour one faction, some another. Loyalties are performed through where one sits, whom one greets, which paper one reads, and what gossip one believes before breakfast. Chocolate in such a place is not neutral. A cup can belong to a network. A house can become identified with a party, a clique, a set of interests. Drinking is social geography. Historians still debate how much influence these public houses truly had on political life, compared with Parliament, court patronage, print culture, and older private networks. It is tempting to imagine revolutions being stirred directly into cups, but the truth is more subtle. These rooms amplified news, shaped reputations, and connected people. Yet they were not magic engines of democracy. They were lively, unequal, smoky, and influential in ways difficult to measure. The atmosphere grows thicker as evening advances. Wet cloaks steam near the fire. Candle wax runs in pale threads. The smell of chocolate mixes with tobacco, ink, damp leather, and human excitement. You can feel the heat of bodies packed close, the brush of a sleeve, the vibration of laughter through the bench beneath you. Outside, rain taps on the windows. Inside, arguments bloom and collapse. A servant carries fresh chocolate in a pot with a long handle, careful not to spill. Preparation has become more systematized in urban businesses, but it is still not effortless. Chocolate must be grated or broken from prepared cakes, mixed with liquid, heated, sweetened, and whisked. The foam is less sacred now and more fashionable, but people still notice. A flat, dull cup suggests carelessness. A lively surface suggests skill. Even gossip tastes better with proper texture. You look at the customers again. A merchant calculates profit from colonial cargo. A lawyer hunts for clients. A young gentleman practices cynicism like a new coat. An older man sits quietly, listening more than speaking, which makes him dangerous. A pamphleteer waits for one good sentence to steal. The chocolate house is a machine that turns drink into conversation, and conversation into influence. But there is another layer beneath the cup. The beverages fueling this sociable world are products of empire, coffee, tea, sugar, cacao, and tobacco, all depend on global trade, colonial control, and labour systems that urban patrons rarely examine while complaining about taxes. The table may feel local, but the cup is international. Its sweetness has crossed oceans before reaching this noisy room. You take another sip. The drink is rich enough to slow you down, even while the room speeds up. Chocolate here is less solemn than in ritual, less private than in palaces, less medicinal than in apothecaries. It becomes social fuel. It helps people linger. It gives the hand something to hold while the tongue does damage. Late at night, the room begins to thin. Chairs are pushed back. A wager is settled with theatrical misery. Newspapers are folded. A servant wipes rings of chocolate from the table, leaving dark smears in the grain. Outside, the street shines black under lamplight. The city smells of rain and smoke. You step into the night with the taste still on your tongue. In these public rooms, chocolate has learned to gossip. It has become part of argument, fashion, club life, news, and risk. Once reserved for sacred cups and elite ceremony, it now sits among pamphlets, wagers, and political suspicion, warm in the hand, sweet in the mouth, and quietly awake beneath the noise. You stand on a harbour at dawn, where the sea breathes against the stones and ships creak like old wooden animals waking from sleep. The air smells of salt, tar, wet rope, fish, smoke, and sugar. Barrels wait in rows. Sacks are hauled by bent backs. Men shout across the water. Gulls cry overhead with the confidence of creatures who have never paid customs duties and never intend to. Chocolate's story now moves across oceans. The cup that once belonged to courts, kitchens, markets, and ceremonies has become part of a wider Atlantic world. Cacao is carried by ship, counted by merchants, taxed by officials, desired by consumers, and tied to the expansion of European empires. But the sweetness spreading through Europe is not just a matter of taste. It rests on land taken, labour forced, and bodies treated as tools of production. The surface of chocolate grows smoother. The history beneath it grows darker. You watch cargo being loaded. Cacao beans are packed for travel, dry and valuable, with their bitter scent hidden inside sacks. Sugar travels too, and sugar is the ingredient that helps European chocolate become addictive to a polite society. Cane fields across the Caribbean and the Americas feed the craving for sweetness. Enslaved Africans and indigenous labourers work in brutal conditions to plant, cut, boil, dry, carry, and process the crops that make luxury possible. The connection is not decorative, it is central. A mainstream historical fact is unavoidable. The growth of chocolate consumption in Europe was linked to colonial trade networks that also depended heavily on plantation slavery, especially through the production of sugar and later cacao in tropical colonies. The cup in a European parlour did not float there on elegance. It arrived through systems designed to extract wealth from land and people. You step from the harbour into an imagined plantation landscape. The light is bright, almost too bright after the shadowed ship holds. Heat presses against your face. The smell changes at once: cane leaves, wet soil, smoke from boiling houses, sweat, animals, and the metallic sweetness of cane juice being reduced over fire. The air is alive with insects. Your shirt clings to your back. Every sound feels heavy. Blades cutting stalks, wood feeding furnaces, commands carried across fields. The dull thud of labour repeated too long. Cacao itself also grows in plantation and smallholding systems, depending on region and period. In Spanish America, cacao from Venezuela, Ecuador, Guatemala, and other regions becomes important in trade. Later, European colonial powers expand cacao cultivation in new territories. The details vary widely, but the pattern is familiar. Tropical crops are reorganized around distant demand. Forest knowledge, agricultural skill, forced work, and commercial ambition become tangled together. There is a strange tidbit from the history of Atlantic trade. Cacao was sometimes smuggled around imperial rules because empires tried to control who could trade what, and merchants, being merchants, often treated rules as polite suggestions written by people standing too far away. Contraband cacao moved through Caribbean networks, slipping past official channels. Even a bitter seed could learn to travel in disguise. You feel the roughness of a sack beneath your hand. It scratches the skin. Inside, cacao beans knock softly together, dry and small. They seem too humble to carry so much history, yet every sack represents trees, harvesting, fermentation, drying, transport, credit, risk, profit, and labour. A merchant sees numbers, a consumer sees pleasure, a worker feels the weight. Historians continue to debate how to balance the roles of indigenous producers, enslaved Africans, free farmers, colonial merchants, and European consumers in different cacao regions. Not every cacao farm was the same. Some areas relied more on small producers, others on enslaved labour, others on mixed systems. The uncertainty matters because it prevents a single flat story. But the larger truth remains steady. Chocolate's rise was inseparable from colonial economies and unequal power. You board a ship in your mind. The hold is dim, close, and smelling of wood, bilge water, spoiled food, rope, and stored cargo. Cacao does not like moisture, so it must be protected. Rats have opinions about everything. Sailors curse softly while checking barrels and sacks. The sea rolls beneath you. Weeks pass in creeks, storms, boredom, hunger, and salt. Trade is not a clean line on a map. It is wet, dangerous, exhausting, and often cruel. When cacao reaches Europe, its rough journey disappears behind polished service. In a wealthy household, a servant grates chocolate into a pot. Sugar is added. Milk may soften it. Spice perfumes it. A silver pot gleams. Porcelain waits. The drink arrives at a bedside or breakfast table as comfort. The person sipping may never imagine the plantation heat, the ship hold, the blistered hands, the counted cargo, the rules bent, the lives narrowed to supply desire. This is one of chocolate's deepest contradictions. It becomes a symbol of intimacy, pleasure, and gentleness while being tied to systems anything but gentle. A warm cup can hide a cold economy. Sweetness can cover bitterness, but it cannot erase it. You stand in a merchant counting house. Ledgers lie open. The room smells of ink, dust, wool, and dried cacao. A clerk writes numbers in careful columns, shipments, prices, losses, duties, debts. The scratch of the pen is quiet, almost soothing, which feels rude given what the numbers mean. Wealth becomes tidy on paper. Human suffering becomes background cost. History often looks most respectable when written in columns. Outside, city consumers grow accustomed to chocolate. Demand encourages supply. Supply encourages expansion. Expansion encourages more labour control. A taste becomes a market. A market becomes a system. A system becomes normal to those benefiting from it. That is how addiction works, not only in bodies but in economies. Evening comes back to the harbour. The last light turns the water bronze. Ropes creak. A sailor spits into the sea. A merchant locks a warehouse door. Somewhere inland, someone drinks chocolate beside a fire and calls it restorative. You remain with the scent of salt and cacao mingled together. The story has widened beyond cups and quarts into ships, plantations, ledgers, and loss. Chocolate is still delicious. That is part of the discomfort. It carries comfort and harm in the same dark seed, asking you to taste carefully, even while the world keeps sweetening the cup. You enter the 19th century through a factory doorway, and the first thing you notice is the noise. It does not murmur like a market or whisper like a monastery. It clanks, grinds, hisses, belts, turns, and shudders. The floor trembles faintly beneath your shoes. Warm air wraps around your face, carrying the smell of roasted cacao, hot metal, coal smoke, steam, oil, sugar, and damp wool coats hung near the entrance. Chocolate has found machinery. For centuries, cacao has been roasted, shelled, ground, mixed, and frothed by hand or with simple tools. Now iron, steam, hydraulics, rollers, mills, and presses begin to change the pace. The old labour does not vanish, because factories still require hands, backs, eyes, judgment, cleaning, carrying, sorting, and packaging. But machines alter what is possible. They make chocolate smoother, more consistent, more scalable, and eventually cheaper for growing numbers of consumers. You walk past sacks of cacao beans stacked like rough brown pillows. They have travelled from tropical farms to industrial towns, carrying the smell of distant heat into a grey morning. Workers cut them open, beans spill into bins with a dry, rattling rush. Their colour varies from reddish-brown to deep purple-brown. Some are plump, some smaller, some broken. Sorting begins. Quality matters more than ever now, because machines can magnify both excellence and mistakes with equal enthusiasm. A mainstream historical fact stands at the centre of this noisy room. In 1828, the Dutch chemist Conrad Johannes van Houten patented a hydraulic press that could separate much of the cocoa butter from roasted cacao, leaving a cake that could be pulverised into cocoa powder. This made chocolate drinks easier to mix and helped open the path toward modern chocolate manufacturing. It was not the only invention that mattered, but it was a mighty turn of the wheel. You approach the press. It is heavy, dark, and serious, the sort of machine that looks as if it would not laugh at your jokes. Warm cacao liquor, made by grinding roasted nibs, is forced under pressure. The machine groans. Cocoa butter, pale, golden, and fragrant, flows away like rich oil. What remains is a dense cocoa cake, dry enough to be broken and powdered. The smell is powerful, roasted, earthy, bitter, and fatty, with a sweetness that is only a promise until sugar arrives. The touch of this new world is different. A handful of cocoa powder is soft and dusty, clinging to the skin. Cocoa butter is smooth, slippery, and melts with body heat. Cacao nibs are brittle, snapping under the teeth. Chocolate is being separated into parts, and once divided, those parts can be recombined in clever ways. Industry loves taking nature apart, labelling the pieces, then selling the reunion at a profit. Very efficient, very modern, mildly cheeky. Van Houten's process also helped create what became known as Dutch cocoa, treated with alkaline salts to reduce acidity, darken the colour, and make the powder disperse more easily in liquid. This changed the flavour and appearance of cocoa drinks. A cup could now be smoother and less gritty. For consumers accustomed to laborious preparation, convenience itself became seductive. You move deeper into the factory. Roasters turn slowly, heating beans until their shells loosen and aroma blooms. The sound is a dry tumbling, like pebbles in a drum. Workers monitor temperature by experience, smell, and timing. A little too little, and the flavour remains flat. Too much, and bitterness burns. Machines may dominate the room, but the nose still matters. Chocolate keeps one foot in craft, even when the other is wearing an industrial boot. Nearby, winnowing machines crack and separate shells from nibs. The shells drift away light and papery. The nibs, rich with fat, move onward to grinding mills. Stone rollers and later metal refiners crush them into a thick, glossy mass called cocoa liquor, though there is no alcohol in it. The name, like so many food terms, seems designed to confuse anyone taking notes at bedtime. A quirky tidbit hides in the factory dust cocoa shells, once treated as waste, found uses in animal feed, garden mulch, flavouring, and even cheap adulterated products. Nothing in industry likes to remain merely leftover. If a factory can sell the sweepings, someone eventually gives the sweepings a respectable name. Historians still argue over how quickly industrial chocolate became accessible to working and middle-class consumers in different countries. Machines lowered costs over time, but taxes, ingredient prices, wages, retail networks, and national habits all shaped who could afford chocolate and how often. A child in one city might know cocoa as a treat. A labourer elsewhere might still see it as a rare purchase. Industrialisation did not make pleasure equal overnight. It simply made inequality more efficiently wrapped. You stand beside a worker feeding a grinder. The air is hot around the machine. Fine particles settle on sleeves and eyelashes. The workers' hands are rough from handling sacks, tools, and hot surfaces. The rhythm is relentless. Beans arrive, machines turn, paste flows, cakes harden, powder rises, sugar is mixed, orders are packed. A clock on the wall marks time not by bells of prayer or market bargaining, but by shifts. This factory world also changes the social meaning of chocolate. It becomes linked with temperance movements, family breakfast, children's nutrition, respectable energy, and moral business in some places. Several important chocolate firms in Britain, including Quaker-founded companies, to promote cocoa as a wholesome alternative to alcohol. Imagine chocolate standing there in a modest coat, saying, "I am not sinful like gin," while containing sugar and profit in both pockets. Still, the association mattered. Cocoa could be marketed as strengthening, domestic, and suitable for everyone. You step outside briefly into an industrial town. Brick buildings line damp streets. Smoke softens the sky. Workers pass with lunch pails. The smell of chocolate sometimes drifts over neighborhoods, turning hard streets strangely tender. For people living near factories, the aroma may be both comforting and exhausting. Sweetness in the air does not erase long hours inside again. Packaging begins to matter. Powdered cocoa can be sold in tins, packets, and branded containers. Labels promise purity, nourishment, quality, and modernity. Trust becomes a commercial object. Consumers cannot inspect every bean, so they learn to trust a name, a seal, a shopkeeper, a printed guarantee. The brand begins to stand between distant production and the household cupboard. Late afternoon light slants through high factory windows, catching cocoa dust like brown gold in the air. The machines continue, indifferent to sunset. You place your hand lightly on a railing and feel the vibration of rollers and belts through the metal. Chocolate is no longer only ground in small batches near a hearth. It is now measured in output, patents, factories, wages, shipments, and market share. Yet the scent remains strangely intimate. Roasted cacao still reaches something quiet in the body, beneath the machines, beneath the smoke, beneath the ledgers and inventions. The old bitterness is present. It has simply learned to move faster. You enter a workshop where chocolate is no longer content to remain only in the cup. The room is warm, but not steamy like an old kitchen, and not violently loud like a great factory floor. It is a place of controlled heat, polished moulds, marble slabs, careful timing, and people watching texture with almost suspicious intensity. The air smells of roasted cacao, sugar, vanilla, metal, wood, and the faint buttery richness of cocoa butter melting somewhere nearby. This is the age when chocolate learns to hold its shape. For a long time, chocolate in Europe and the Americas is mainly a drink. It may be thick or thin, sweet or spiced, luxurious or medicinal, but it is still something poured. Even when cacao paste is formed into cakes or tablets, those are usually meant to be grated or dissolved into liquid. Now, through industrial invention and better control over cocoa butter, sugar, grinding, and cooling, chocolate becomes something you can bite. You stand beside a marble table. Its surface is cool under your fingertips, smooth as still water. Warm chocolate is poured onto it in a glossy dark sheet. A worker spreads it back and forth with a wide spatula. The motion is slow and practiced. The chocolate thickens as it cools, then is gathered, warmed slightly, spread again, and watched closely. This careful handling helps encourage stable crystals in the cocoa butter, giving finished chocolate a pleasing shine and snap. The process will become known as tempering, and it is both science and patience pretending to be simple. A mainstream historical fact sits at the heart of this transformation in the 19th century. Advances in cocoa pressing, refining, and moulding helped create modern eating chocolate. In 1847, the British firm S. Fry and Sons produced one of the first commercial solid chocolate bars by mixing cocoa powder, sugar, and cocoa butter into a paste that could be moulded. That bar was not yet the silky confection many people imagine today, but it marked a major shift. Chocolate could now travel in the pocket, sit on a shop shelf, and be eaten directly. You watch the mixture being prepared. Cocoa powder brings dark bitterness. Sugar brings grainy sweetness. Cocoa butter brings smoothness, flow, and structure. The ingredients are combined under heat until they become a thick paste. It is not as fluid as a drink, not as dry as a cake. It occupies a tempting middle state, glossy and stubborn, like it knows it is about to become famous. The worker pours the mass into a mould. The mould is made of metal, cool and slightly reflective. You hear the soft slap as chocolate settles into each rectangular space. The tray is tapped to release air bubbles. Tiny tremors pass across the surface. Then it rests, cooling into a solid form. The smell is rich, but sharper than modern chocolate, because early bars are often coarse by today's standards. Sugar crystals may feel gritty. The cacao may taste intense, even rough. Smoothness will improve with later refining, but the idea has arrived. A quirky tidbit waits near the moulds. Early solid chocolate was sometimes promoted as portable nourishment rather than only as candy. It was compact, energizing, and respectable enough to carry. Imagine a 19th century traveller pulling out a hard chocolate tablet with the seriousness of someone eating practical fuel, while secretly enjoying every bite. Very noble, very convenient, possibly a little self-deceiving. You take a piece of early eating chocolate in your hand. It is firm, slightly dull, and not perfectly smooth. When you break it, the snap is modest. Not yet the crisp sound of a finely tempered modern bar. A crumb touches your fingertip and melts slowly. You place it on your tongue. First comes sugar, then bitterness, then fat beginning to soften with warmth. The texture is grainier than expected. It asks for chewing. It does not dissolve into silk. Still, it offers something revolutionary: chocolate without a cup. That changes everything about desire. A drink requires preparation, vessels, heat, and time. A solid bar can be stored, sold, carried, gifted, hidden, rationed, and eaten privately. It slips into bags, drawers, lunch tins, bedside tables, and pockets. It becomes more personal. You no longer need a servant with a pot, a kitchen fire, or a formal moment. You can break off a square when the day has disappointed you, which history suggests happens often enough to support an industry. Solid chocolate also opens the door to shapes, tablets, sticks, pastilles, drops, figures, creams, bonbons, and moulded novelties begin to multiply. Chocolate can surround fillings. It can coat nuts or fruit. It can be poured into decorative forms for holidays and gifts. Its surface can carry letters, patterns, company names, or images. Chocolate becomes edible design. Historians still argue about how quickly consumers accepted eating chocolate as distinct from drinking chocolate. In some places, the beverage remained dominant for many decades. In others, solid forms gained ground as factories improved taste and price. Habits do not change simply because an invention exists. People must learn what a product is for, when to eat it, whom to give it to, and whether it feels proper or childish or luxurious. Food enters the mouth only after it enters custom. You move through a confectioner's shop. Glass jars catch the light. Paper packets sit in rows. The room smells of sugar, cocoa, fruit syrups, polished wood, and dust from the street. A child presses close to the window, eyes fixed on small chocolate shapes. An adult pretends not to be equally interested. Behind the counter, the shopkeeper weighs pieces on a scale. The metal pans swing gently. A parcel is wrapped in paper and tied with string, its corners folded with crisp efficiency. Touch matters here. The paper crinkles. The chocolate leaves a faint mark if held too long. A bar can be broken and shared, each crack making a little sound of permission. The solid form gives chocolate new social gestures. You offer a piece. You save a piece. You refuse the last piece while hoping someone insists. This is civilization at its most delicate and dishonest. The rise of solid chocolate also depends on control. Cocoa butter must be present in the right amount. Sugar must be ground fine enough. Heat must be managed. Moulds must be clean. Storage must avoid bloom. That pale, dusty coating caused by fat or sugar crystals rising to the surface. Bloom does not always mean chocolate is spoiled, but it looks like the chocolate has seen a ghost. Customers are rarely reassured by ghostly confectionery. Evening settles over the workshop. The moulds are turned out. Bars slide free with a soft knock, dark and rectangular, lined like little roof tiles. They are stacked, wrapped, labelled, and sent into the world. The room cools. The scent of cacao remains on the marble, in the wood, in the sleeves of workers heading home. You hold one finished bar for a moment. It is small, solid, portable, and quiet. Yet inside it is a massive change in human habit. Chocolate has crossed from cup to hand, from ceremony to snack, from prepared drink to personal object. It can now wait for you in a pocket, patient as a secret, ready to break open with one small snap. You arrive in Switzerland with cold air on your cheeks and the smell of snowmelt, wood smoke, milk, and distant pasture drifting through a town of tidy roofs and quiet workshops. The mountains rise beyond the windows, pale and patient, as if they have been waiting for chocolate to become creamier. Inside, the room is warm. Copper vessels gleam, stone rollers turn, milk is being dried, sugar measured, cacao refined, and everyone seems unusually calm for people changing global taste forever. This is where chocolate becomes smooth enough to melt into memory. Solid chocolate already exists, but much of it is still dark, coarse, and intense. It can be pleasant, but it often carries a rough texture and a bitter edge. Then Swiss makers begin combining new techniques with dairy science, and the result is milk chocolate. Softer, sweeter, paler, and gentler on the tongue. It will reshape what millions of people think chocolate should be. You step near a workbench where cacao paste is waiting in a dark, glossy mass. Beside it sits sugar, fine and white, and milk in a form that matters deeply powdered or condensed. Fresh milk is full of water, and water is not friendly to chocolate making. It can cause thickening, spoilage, and storage problems. The trick is to bring milk's sweetness, fat, and softness into chocolate without ruining the mixture. A very dairy sort of puzzle, and Switzerland, surrounded by cows and confidence, is ready. A mainstream historical fact rests here in 1875. Daniel Peter of Switzerland developed a successful milk chocolate by using condensed milk made possible through the work of Henri Nestlé. This combination helped create a stable, creamy product that could be manufactured and sold widely. The partnership of cacao, sugar, cocoa butter, and milk made chocolate more approachable to many consumers. Bitterness was no longer the main voice. Cream had entered the choir. You watch the ingredients blend. The colour lightens from deep brown to warm chestnut. The smell changes too. Cacao remains, but now it is wrapped in cooked milk. Caramel notes, sugar, and soft fat. Steam fogs the window. Outside, a cart passes over damp stones with a muted clatter. Inside, the mixture thickens, folds, and shines under pressure. The touch of milk chocolate is its secret. When properly made, it softens quickly against warmth. It does not merely break, it yields. You place a small piece on your tongue, and instead of demanding attention with bitterness, it dissolves slowly, releasing sweetness, dairy richness, and mellow cacao. It is less ceremonial, less stern, less adult in the old sense. This is chocolate that wants to be liked. Frankly, it succeeds with almost suspicious ease. Another Swiss innovation soon deepens the transformation. In 1879, Rodolphe Lindt develops conching, a process that stirs and works chocolate for long periods, smoothing texture and mellowing flavour. You stand beside an early conche, shaped somewhat like a shell, heavy and mechanical, moving chocolate back and forth with slow persistence. The sound is soft but constant roll. Press, fold, breathe, heat, friction, and time reduce harshness, distribute cocoa butter, and create a silkier mouthfeel. A quirky tidbit rests in the legend of conching. One popular story claims Lindt accidentally left a machine running longer than intended, and discovered the chocolate had become smoother. Whether accident, experiment, or later myth, the tale has charm. History loves a happy mistake, especially when the mistake tastes expensive. The room's atmosphere becomes almost hypnotic. Warm chocolate moves in waves, wooden floors creak under careful steps, Milk powder dusts a sleeve. Sugar clicks against a scoop. Outside, bells from grazing animals may sound faintly across pasture, delicate and irregular. The factory is not silent, but compared with larger industrial plants, this imagined Swiss workshop feels controlled, almost domestic. Every process leans toward refinement. Historians still debate how much milk chocolate's rise depended on Swiss technical brilliance versus broader forces such as cheaper sugar, expanding dairy industries, better machinery, colonial cacao supplies, and changing consumer preferences. In truth, no invention succeeds alone. The smooth bar needs chemistry, cows, marketing, trade, labour, machines, and customers ready to prefer sweetness over severity. Still, the Swiss contribution to texture and milk chocolate is impossible to ignore. You leave the workshop and enter a shop where chocolate is displayed like small treasure. Bars are wrapped neatly. Boxes sit behind glass. The air smells of paper, sugar, polished wood, and cocoa. A mother chooses a gift. A traveller buys something for the train. A child watches the exchange with the solemn hope of someone negotiating silently with fate. Milk chocolate feels democratic compared with aristocratic drinking chocolate, but it is still a manufactured pleasure shaped by price, access, and brand. Its popularity spreads because it fits many moods. Dark chocolate can feel intense, adult, even challenging. Milk chocolate feels comforting, friendly, and generous. It can be eaten by children, offered to guests, packed for journeys, sent as gifts, or used to soften a difficult afternoon. It does not ask you to interpret it. It simply melts and says, "There now. Perhaps life is not entirely terrible." That gentleness is powerful. The addition of milk changes not only flavour but emotional meaning. Chocolate becomes associated with childhood, care, reward, and softness. It enters the nursery, the school satchel, the holiday box, the romantic present, and the quiet personal ritual. The old sacred bitterness remains in the background, but now it is wearing a wool blanket. You stand by the window as evening falls. Snow begins, faint and slow, touching the dark street without hurry. Inside, bars cool in their moulds. Their surfaces shine under lamplight. When one is broken, the snap is clean. But the edges soften quickly between warm fingers. The smell is gentle milk, caramel, vanilla, cacao. You understand why this version conquers taste. It makes chocolate easier to love, easier to share, easier to mass produce, and easier to crave. It smooths the grain, quiets the bitterness, and turns a demanding food into a daily comfort. In the Swiss cold, with milk in the mixture and machines moving slowly through the warm room, chocolate becomes creamy enough to travel everywhere. You step into a city street at the turn of the 20th century, where shop windows glow against damp pavement and painted signs, compete for your attention with the confidence of circus performers. The air smells of coal smoke, rain, fresh bread, horse leather, newspaper ink, and, from one bright storefront, chocolate. Not just chocolate as food, chocolate as promise. Behind the glass, boxes are stacked in careful pyramids. Wrappers shine in red, gold, cream, and deep brown. A poster shows a rosy child holding a cup of cocoa. Another shows a graceful woman receiving a heart-shaped box. Because apparently romance now requires packaging. Inside the shop, shelves are arranged to guide the eye and soften the will. You meant only to look. The shop knows better. This is the age when chocolate becomes a modern brand. The mainstream historical fact is clear from the late 19th century into the 20th century. Chocolate companies used mass advertising, distinctive packaging, trademark, posters, and emotional storytelling to build consumer loyalty. Firms no longer sold only cacao, cocoa, or bars. They sold trust, purity, comfort, energy, romance, childhood, patriotism, and reward. A printed label became a small stage where desire learned its lines. You stand close to a display of wrapped bars. The paper feels smooth beneath your fingertips, slightly waxy, folded with mechanical precision. The wrapper protects the chocolate, yes, but it also speaks before taste does. It tells you this product is clean, modern, reliable, and worth choosing over the rival bar sitting 2 inches away with equally innocent intentions. The chocolate inside may be similar, but the story outside is working very hard. In earlier centuries, trust often came through household preparation, local sellers, or elite reputation. Now, with factories sending products across regions and nations, consumers need names they recognize: Cadbury, Fry, Rowntree, Hershey, Lindt, Nestlé, Suchard, Meunier, and many others build identities that travel farther than the smell of roasting cacao ever could. A brand is a memory device. It helps a shopper say, "Ah, yes, that one," and feel slightly less lost in the expanding world of goods. You walk into a printing workshop where chocolate posters are being made. The room smells of ink, glue, paper, dust, and hot metal. Sheets hang to dry, bright with colour. Children smile from advertisements with suspiciously perfect cheeks. Mothers serve cocoa in tidy kitchens. Athletes, soldiers, students, and elegant ladies all appear as proof that chocolate can belong to any respectable life. Advertising takes one product and gives it a wardrobe of identities. A quirky tidbit sits in the world of old chocolate promotions. Some companies included collectible cards inside packages, showing animals, famous people, inventions, foreign costumes, or historical scenes. Children and adults gathered them into albums. So chocolate did not merely satisfy a craving, it offered a tiny encyclopedia, sometimes accurate, sometimes wildly confident in the charmingly wrong way of old educational cards. A snack with homework attached, but in a pleasant disguise. You enter a middle-class home where a tin of cocoa sits in the kitchen. The room is warm with steam from washing, soup simmering, and bread cooling under cloth. A mother spoons cocoa powder into a pot. Milk heats gently. Sugar is added. The smell rises soft and brown, blending with soap, wool, and morning air. Cocoa is marketed as nourishing for children, strengthening for workers, suitable for families, and morally preferable to alcohol. Some brands, especially those shaped by Quaker business culture in Britain, emphasize purity, health, and social responsibility. Yet the advertising is selective. It shows clean cups, happy homes, and strong bodies. It rarely shows the plantations, low wages, colonial hierarchies, or difficult agricultural labour behind cacao and sugar. The poster world is bright because it leaves shadows outside the frame. That is not unique to chocolate. Modern advertising is very skilled at placing difficult truths just beyond the decorative border. Historians still argue how much advertising created new demand for chocolate, and how much it simply rode along with rising wages, cheaper production, urban retail, and changing diets. Did people buy more chocolate because posters persuaded them, or did posters become powerful because people were already ready to buy? The answer is tangled. Desire rarely has one parent. It is raised by price, habit, memory, convenience, taste, and the small glittering lie that this purchase will improve the day. You continue down the street to a confectionery counter. Glass cases hold truffles, creams, caramels, nougat bars, chocolate-covered nuts, and moulded seasonal figures. The smell is intoxicating sugar, cocoa butter, roasted nuts, vanilla, fruit fondant, polished wood, and perfume from customers leaning too close. A shop bell rings. A clerk in a clean apron asks what you would like. You hesitate, as any sensible person would, because choice has become part of the pleasure. Chocolate is no longer only one experience. It is segmented. There are bars for quick energy, boxes for gifts, cocoa for breakfast, fancy assortments for courtship, cheaper sweets for children, premium dark tablets for connoisseurs, and seasonal novelties for holidays. Companies discover that the same ingredient can be sold as comfort in the morning, reward in the afternoon, romance at night, and festive obligation in December. Very efficient, slightly manipulative, deliciously so. Romance becomes especially important. Heart boxes, satin ribbons, delicate fillings, and sentimental advertising teach consumers that chocolate can say what awkward humans struggle to express. A box becomes a message. I admire you. I desire you. I apologize. I remembered the date. Please do not ask too many questions. The sweetness of chocolate pairs neatly with the sweetness of affection. and businesses are more than happy to help love develop a retail habit. Children become another centre of the chocolate world. Bright wrappers, small bars, playful shapes, and cheerful mascots turn chocolate into a treat associated with innocence and reward. A square after lessons, a bar at the cinema, a coin spent at the corner shop. The sensory memory is strong paper tearing, foil crackling, chocolate warming in the hand, the first bite sweet and milky. Childhood learns brands early, and brands, being patient creatures, remember, by evening, electric lights glow in a shop windows, posters shine even in the rain. A worker buys a small bar on the way home. A young man chooses a box and hopes it looks generous. A child presses the nose to glass until gently moved along. The city hums with trams, footsteps, wheels, and distant factory smoke. You hold a wrapped chocolate bar and notice how much of its power exists before the first bite. The colour, the name, the promise, the memory, the imagined comfort. Chocolate has become a product of modern desire, shaped not only by cacao and sugar, but by stories printed in ink. It is no longer enough for chocolate to taste good. It must mean something. And so, the brand settles into the hand like a small spell. The wrapper opens with a whisper, the scent rises. You take one piece, and the city outside seems, for a brief moment, a little softer. You walk into a military supply depot where the air is cool, dry, and full of practical smells: canvas, cardboard, dust, oil, wool, boot leather, and chocolate packed not for romance, but for survival. There are no velvet boxes here, no pretty ribbons, no shop window promises glowing in rainy streets. Everything is counted, stacked, stamped, and stored. The chocolate sits in plain wrappers and ration tins, waiting to become energy in the pocket of someone far from home. This is chocolate in uniform. It seems almost strange at first. A food once poured in elite cups and sold in bright shops now becomes part of soldiers' equipment. Yet chocolate is compact, calorie-dense, portable, and emotionally powerful. It can survive travel better than many fresh foods. It offers sugar, fat, and a quick sense of comfort. Armies notice such things. Armies notice anything that can fit inside a pack and keep a tired person moving for one more mile. A mainstream historical fact anchors this world during the 20th century, especially in the First and Second World Wars. Chocolate became an important military ration in several countries. It appeared in emergency kits, field rations, morale packages, and home front relief parcels. Sometimes it was designed to taste pleasant. Sometimes it was designed very specifically not to taste too pleasant. Because officials feared soldiers might eat emergency supplies before they were truly needed, government logic, as usual, found a way to make chocolate less fun. You stand beside a table where ration bars are being inspected. They are dense, hard, and wrapped tightly against moisture. Some include added nutrients. Some are meant to resist melting in hot climates. Some are bitter, dry, or waxy. You pick one up. It feels heavier than its size suggests, solid as a small brick of intention. The paper is rough under your fingers. When broken, it gives a dull snap rather than an elegant crack. The smell is faint, restrained, not the lush aroma of a confectionery. A quirky tidbit rises from the Second World War. The United States Army worked with chocolate manufacturers to create emergency ration bars that were intentionally not too tasty. One famous version was expected to taste only a little better than a boiled potato. One pauses here in respect for the potato, which did not ask to be insulted by military procurement. The goal was practical restraint. A soldier would carry it, not devour it casually. You follow a soldier along a muddy road. Rain has turned the ground into a sucking brown paste. The air smells of wet wool, smoke, metal, cold earth, and exhaustion. Boots pull free with soft, ugly sounds. Somewhere in the distance, artillery rolls like weather with a temper. The soldier reaches into a pocket and finds chocolate. Maybe it is a ration bar. Maybe it arrived in a parcel from home. Maybe it is slightly crushed, blooming pale at the edges, but still precious. He breaks off a piece. His fingers are cold, stiff, and dirty. The chocolate is hard against his teeth. It softens slowly. Sweetness arrives, then fat, then cacao, then the memory of kitchens, shops, family, ordinary streets, and all the small comforts that war has interrupted. The bite is not just calories, it is a reminder that life once had softer textures. Chocolate's wartime role is not only nutritional, it is emotional. Governments, charities, families, and companies understand that sweets can lift morale. Packages sent to troops often include chocolate because it feels personal even when mass-produced. On the home front, children may save coupons, families may ration sugar, and factories may shift production for military supply. Chocolate becomes part of sacrifice and longing, part of the shared language of endurance. You enter a wartime factory where women and men work long shifts under strict schedules. The machines turn steadily. The smell of cocoa mixes with steam, hot sugar, paper, and fatigue. Workers pack bars for soldiers, sometimes while their own access to sweets is limited by rationing. The irony is quiet but sharp. Chocolate leaves the factory by the crate, bound for distant fronts, while people nearby measure sugar carefully at home. Sweetness becomes strategic. Historians still argue about how much chocolate improved actual battlefield performance compared with its psychological value. Calories mattered, sugar and fat mattered, portability mattered, yet morale is harder to measure. How do you weigh the comfort of one familiar taste during fear, boredom, cold, and homesickness? Military reports can count ounces, but not the way a square of chocolate might make a person feel briefly human again. You move from a trench to a desert camp, then to a jungle path, then to the cramped interior of a ship. Chocolate travels badly in some climates and brilliantly in others. Heat melts it, cold hardens it, moisture damages it. Manufacturers experiment with formulas to resist melting, with packaging to protect against damp, and with shapes that can be divided easily. A bar must survive pockets, packs, warehouses, ships, insects, and impatience. Food science becomes a quiet companion to strategy. There is also disappointment. Not every ration chocolate is beloved. Some soldiers complain, some trade it, some hoard it, some shave it into hot drinks, some eat it only when necessary. The difference between chocolate as treat and chocolate as ration can be enormous. A candy bar offers pleasure. An emergency ration offers survival with a stern expression. Both are chocolate, but they do not sing the same song. You sit in a dim barracks at night. Rain taps the roof. Men speak softly or not at all. A small parcel has arrived from home, wrapped in paper worn from travel. Inside are socks, a letter, and a bar of chocolate. The letter smells faintly of another house, another life. The chocolate has cracked during shipping, but nobody minds. Pieces are shared. For a few minutes, the room changes. The air still smells of damp wool and tobacco, but now there is sweetness too. This is the power chocolate carries through war. It condenses comfort into a small, durable form. It can be official supply, private gift, emergency tool, or black market treasure. It can taste wonderful, terrible, or merely adequate. Yet people remember it because it arrives when ordinary pleasure is scarce. Morning returns to the depot. Crates are sealed. Labels are checked. Trucks wait outside with engines coughing in the cold air. You place the ration bar back on the table, hearing the paper scrape softly against wood. Chocolate has become fuel, morale, memory, and military object. The same dark sweetness that once marked status now sits beside bandages, matches, and maps, ready for hunger, fear, and the long road. You travel into a cacao-growing village where the morning begins before the sun has fully lifted, and the air is already warm enough to rest against your skin like a damp cloth. Roosters call from somewhere behind a house. Leaves drip from the night's moisture. Smoke rises from a cooking fire, carrying the smell of wood ash, cassava, plantain, porridge, and earth. Beyond the houses, the cacao trees wait in shade. This is the farming world behind the chocolate shelf. You walk along a narrow path into a grove. The ground is soft beneath your feet, layered with fallen leaves that release a dark, sweet smell when stepped upon. Cacao trees grow beneath taller shade trees, their trunks slender and patched with moss, their leaves broad and glossy. Pods cling directly to the trunk and older branches, yellow, orange, red, and green. Each one ridged like a small carved vessel. Some are ready for harvest. Some need time. Cacao does not hurry because the modern market is impatient. The tree has its own opinions. A farmer carries a cutlass or harvesting knife and moves with practiced care. Pods are cut without damaging the bark, because the tree must keep producing. The sound is clean and woody. A pod drops softly into a basket. Another follows. The work seems peaceful for a moment, but only from a distance. Up close, it is skilled, repetitive, physically demanding, and vulnerable to weather, disease, price swings, pests, and buyers who may not be feeling generous. A mainstream historical fact belongs here today. Much of the world's cacao is grown by smallholder farmers, especially in West Africa, with Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana among the largest producing countries. Cacao also grows in Latin America, Southeast Asia, and other tropical regions. But West Africa has become central to the global chocolate supply. The world's craving rests heavily on families tending small plots, not on the glossy image of effortless sweetness. You watch a pod being split open. The blade taps, turns, and cracks the shell. Inside, white pulp surrounds the seeds in slippery rows. The smell is bright and fruity, almost like lychee, citrus, and flowers mixed with wet wood. It is surprising every time. Chocolate, at this stage, smells nothing like a candy bar. A child nearby sucks the sweet pulp from a seed and grins. The seed itself is bitter and purple inside, but the pulp is refreshing. A tiny secret of cacao farming. The fresh fruit is a treat in its own right. The seeds and pulp are gathered into heaps, boxes, or baskets for fermentation. This is where flavour begins to deepen. Microbes transform the pulp, heat builds, juices drain, and the seeds change from a living possibility into future chocolate. The air around a fermenting pile is warm and sour-sweet, with notes of fruit, vinegar, alcohol, and wet leaves. You place your hand near the mass and feel heat rising from it. It is alive with transformation, though no one is making a dramatic speech about microbes, which is considerate. Fermentation takes skill, too short, and the cacao may taste flat, harsh, or raw, too long, and off flavours can develop. After fermentation, beans are dried in the sun, spread across mats, trays, patios, or raised beds. Someone turns them with a rake or by hand so they dry evenly. The sound is soft and dry, a rushing scrape like tiny shells. The smell shifts from fruity to nutty, acidic, and warm. Rain clouds are watched carefully. A sudden shower can damage days of work. Farmers look at the sky the way traders look at ledgers. A quirky tidbit rests in the grove. Cacao flowers grow straight from the trunk and are pollinated by tiny midges. Small flies so unimpressive looking that one might not expect them to support a global obsession. Bees get poetry. Butterflies get paintings. Midges get chocolate on everyone's birthday. History is not always fair in its thank you notes. You sit with a farming family sorting dried beans. Fingers move quickly through the pile, removing flat, mouldy, broken or damaged beans. The beans are rough and dry against your palm. Their colour is reddish-brown, their scent sharp and earthy. A sack is filled and weighed. The number matters. It will affect income, school fees, medicine, repairs, food, and debt. Chocolate may be a pleasure far away, but here cacao is a livelihood. Global trade enters quietly, then takes over the room. Farmers often sell to local buyers, cooperatives, or middlemen. Beans move through layers of transport, storage, export, processing, manufacturing, and retail. At each stage, value changes. By the time chocolate reaches a shop in a wealthy city, the price includes branding, processing, packaging, shipping, marketing, retail margins, and taxes. The farmer's share is usually small compared with the final value of the chocolate bar. This is one of the bitter facts inside sweetness. Historians and economists still debate which reforms best improve farmers' lives: higher farm gate prices, cooperatives, certification programs, government price supports, direct trade, productivity improvements, diversification, land rights, or stronger regulation of corporate supply chains. Each answer helps in some situations and fails in others. The problem is not one knot, but a whole fishing net of poverty, market power, climate stress, aging trees, and global demand. You walk through another region, another farm, another climate. In Ecuador, fine aroma cacao carries a different reputation. In Peru, small producers work with native varieties and specialty markets. In Indonesia, fermentation practices and quality systems vary widely. In Ghana, state systems shape pricing and marketing. In Côte d'Ivoire, huge volumes feed mass-market chocolate. No single farmer represents them all. Cacao is global, but its realities are local, specific, and personal. The atmosphere in the grove changes toward late afternoon. Heat softens, insects grow louder. The smell of drying beans lingers in the yard, mixing with cooking smoke and ripe fruit. A farmer washes hands stained faintly by cacao pulp. A child kicks a ball near sacks waiting for collection. A radio murmurs somewhere indoors. Life is not only hardship, and it is not a sentimental postcard either. It is work, weather, family, patience, frustration, skill, and hope measured season by season. Climate change adds another pressure. Altering rainfall, heat patterns, disease risks, and suitable growing zones. Cacao trees are sensitive. Too much sun, too little rain, poor soil, or spreading pests can threaten harvests. Farmers adapt with shade management, pruning, new varieties, soil care, and crop diversification. But adaptation costs time and money. The global appetite for chocolate is steady. The conditions for growing cacao are not. You hold a dried bean and think of the shelf far away, where chocolate waits in neat wrappers under bright lights. Between this rough seed and that smooth bar lies a long chain of decisions. Who is paid? Who has power? Who absorbs risk? Who gets praised for flavour? Who disappears behind a logo? Evening settles over the village. Smoke thickens in the cooling air. The drying beans are covered for the night. The baskets are stacked. The grove darkens, and the pods on the trees fade into shadow. You hear crickets, voices, a pot lid placed gently on clay, leaves moving in a small wind. Chocolate's global life depends on this quiet place, not on fantasy, not on magic, not on a smiling wrapper, but on hands that cut pods, turn beans, read weather, and carry sacks. The world may call chocolate an indulgence, but here it is labour before it is luxury. You enter a modern supermarket at night, when the bright aisles feel almost theatrical and the floor shines with reflections of overhead lights. Refrigerators hum along the wall. A cartwheel squeaks somewhere with the stubborn rhythm of a tiny mechanical complaint. The air smells faintly of cardboard, fruit, cleaning spray, roasted coffee, and chocolate waiting in hundreds of wrappers. Here, chocolate has learned to speak the language of health. You stand in front of a shelf lined with dark bars. Their labels are serious and elegant, wearing percentages like academic degrees: 70%, 85%, 90%, and one bar so dark it seems personally offended by sweetness. Words appear everywhere: antioxidant, single origin, rich in flavonols, intense, pure, clean, natural, guilt-free chocolate, once marketed as pleasure, comfort, fuel, romance, and childhood treat, now presents itself as a kind of edible self-improvement. A small square becomes a lifestyle decision. Very dignified, considering it still melts in your pocket. A mainstream historical fact belongs in this aisle. Cacao contains compounds called flavonols, a type of plant polyphenol that researchers have studied for possible effects on blood pressure, blood vessel function, and inflammation. Dark chocolate and cocoa products can contain more cocoa solids than milk chocolate, and often more of these compounds, depending on processing. This is the seed from which many modern health claims grow, but the seed grows into a forest of exaggeration. You pick up a dark chocolate bar. The paper feels matte and expensive, slightly rough beneath your thumb. Inside, foil crinkles softly. The bar snaps cleanly when you break it, releasing a scent of roasted cacao, dried fruit, faint smoke, and bitterness. You place a square on your tongue. It does not rush, it softens slowly, almost stubbornly, giving you sharp cacao first, then fruit, then tannic dryness like strong tea. It is pleasurable, but it is not pretending to be a cupcake. Dark chocolate asks for attention. People often want chocolate to be healthy because they already want chocolate. This is a very human arrangement. When science suggests that cocoa may have benefits, desire sits up straighter and says, "See, I knew I was making wise choices at midnight." Yet most commercial chocolate also contains sugar, fat, and calories. Some dark bars contain less sugar than milk chocolate, but not always. Some cocoa processing reduces flavanol content. Some products market the romance of health more strongly than they deliver the substance. The atmosphere shifts to a kitchen late in the evening. A person opens a cupboard quietly, perhaps with the stealth of someone who has decided that one square does not count if no plate is involved. The room smells of dish soap, tea, and the last warmth of dinner. A small piece of dark chocolate rests on the counter. It is cool at first, then softens between fingers. The person tells themselves it is for heart health. Perhaps it is. Perhaps it is for sanity. These are not enemies. A quirky tidbit lives in the chemistry of chocolate cacao contains theobromine, a mild stimulant related to caffeine. Its name comes from Theobroma cacao, often translated as food of the gods. So when someone says they need chocolate to function, they are not entirely inventing the drama. Their nervous system may be enjoying a gentle nudge from a compound, with a name that sounds like a minor deity who specializes in afternoon cravings. Chocolate also carries emotional meaning that health language cannot fully explain. It can comfort, reward, distract, soothe, or mark a pause in the day. Scientists can measure flavanols, sugar content, fat composition, and caffeine levels. They have a harder time measuring the small private relief of a square melting slowly, while the house grows quiet. Not impossible, perhaps, but difficult to fit neatly into a nutrition label. Historians still argue whether the modern health image of dark chocolate represents a meaningful return to cacao's older medicinal reputation, or mainly a fresh marketing costume for a familiar indulgence. Early physicians once classified chocolate through humoral theory and prescribed it for strength, digestion, or weakness. Modern researchers use clinical trials, biomarkers, and statistical models. The methods are different. The desire is familiar. People still want pleasure to arrive carrying permission. You move from the supermarket to a wellness shop, where the lighting is warmer and the prices seem to meditate. Cacao nibs sit in glass jars. Raw cacao powder is packed beside herbal teas and protein blends. Someone describes ceremonial cacao in a soft voice. Someone else compares magnesium content. The smell is nutty, bitter, and dry. You take a cacao nib between your fingers. It is small, cracked, and rough, with a texture like a roasted nut that has read philosophy. When you chew it, bitterness spreads quickly, followed by acidity and a faint fruit note. The modern health world often divides chocolate into moral categories. Dark is virtuous, milk is childish, white is barely invited to the meeting, sugar is suspect, cocoa percentage becomes a badge of discipline. Yet taste is not morality. A person enjoying milk chocolate is not a fallen citizen. A person eating 100% cacao is not automatically enlightened. Sometimes they are simply chewing something very bitter and hoping someone notices. Still, there is value in understanding the difference between cacao-rich products and sugar-rich confections. Higher cocoa content can mean deeper flavor and fewer added sweeteners, though it also can mean more intensity and more bitterness. Cocoa powder without much sugar differs greatly from a candy bar. A small portion of dark chocolate may fit comfortably into many diets, while large amounts can bring excess calories. Like many pleasures, chocolate behaves best when not asked to solve every problem. You sit at a table with 3 samples: milk chocolate, dark chocolate, and unsweetened cocoa nibs. The milk chocolate melts quickly, creamy and sweet, with caramel softness. The dark chocolate opens slowly, carrying roasted bitterness and dried fruit. The nibs crunch sharply, earthy and raw-edged. Each one tells a different truth about cacao. None is the whole story. The scholarly uncertainty deepens when researchers study chocolate's health effects. Is it the flavanols, the minerals, the replacement of less satisfying sweets? The pleasure that reduces stress for a moment? Studies differ by product, dose, population, and design. Cocoa flavanols may show measurable effects under certain conditions, but a heavily sweetened chocolate dessert is not the same as a controlled cocoa extract. That distinction often gets lost somewhere between a scientific paper and a cheerful headline. Night settles outside the supermarket windows. The aisle lights remain bright. Wrappers gleam in neat rows, promising intensity, purity, joy, balance, energy, indulgence, and restraint all at once. Chocolate has become a mirror for modern confusion. You want pleasure, but not guilt, sweetness, but not excess, ancient mystery, but with a nutrition claim, comfort, but preferably with antioxidants. You hold the last square of dark chocolate and let it melt slowly. The bitterness is not punishment. The sweetness is not innocence. The health claims are not entirely fantasy, but they are not magic either. Chocolate remains what it has always been: complicated, fragrant, stimulating, comforting, and very good at becoming whatever a culture wants to believe. You step into a small chocolate workshop where the machines are quieter, the batches are smaller, and everyone seems to be listening to the beans. The room is warm but not rushed. Light falls across sacks of cacao marked with country names, farm names, cooperative names, harvest dates, and sometimes notes scribbled in marker by someone who cares very much about fermentation. The air smells of roasted nuts, dried fruit, honey, vinegar, brown sugar, toasted bread, and the deep familiar darkness of cacao. This is the craft chocolate revival. The shelves are not crowded with bright candy wrappers or cartoon promises. Instead, there are slim bars wrapped in thick paper, each one announcing origin, percentage, roast style, and sometimes the name of the farmer or region: Madagascar, Ecuador, Belize, Vietnam, Tanzania, Peru, Philippines, Guatemala. The labels speak softly but intensely, like people at a tasting table who have opinions about acidity and are prepared to share them. You may not have asked, but here you are. A mainstream historical fact belongs in this room from the late 20th century into the 21st century. A growing bean-to-bar movement pushed some chocolate makers to buy cacao more directly, emphasize origin and flavor differences, and control the whole process from roasting beans to molding finished bars. This movement responded partly to mass-market sameness. It treated cacao less like an anonymous commodity and more like coffee, wine, or tea, shaped by genetics, soil, climate, harvest, fermentation, drying, roasting, and craft. You approach a sorting table. Cacao beans are spread in a shallow layer. They are not identical. Some are round and plump, some flatter, some darker, some reddish, some with broken shells. A maker moves their hands through the pile, removing stones, twigs, flat beans, mouldy beans, and anything that does not belong. The sound is dry and delicate, like pebbles shifting in a riverbed. You touch one bean. It feels rough, light, and quiet. Yet it holds a flavor world waiting to be opened. Roasting begins in a small drum or oven. The beans turn slowly as heat works through them. Their shells crackle faintly. The workshop fills with aroma. At first, it smells fruity and sharp, then warmer, nuttier, more rounded. A careful maker watches time and temperature, adjusting the roast to highlight what the beans already carry. Some origins may taste naturally bright, with red fruit or citrus notes. Others lean toward nuts, caramel, flowers, spices, or earthy depth. None of these flavors need to be added. They can emerge from cacao itself, which is frankly showing off. A quirky tidbit waits beside a tasting notebook. Trained chocolate tasters sometimes use flavor wheels with categories such as fruity, floral, nutty, woody, spicy, dairy, roasted, and earthy. So yes, someone may take a square of chocolate, close their eyes, and say it reminds them of plum jam, cedar, and warm biscuits. It sounds dramatic until you taste carefully and realize they may not be entirely making it up. Annoying, but impressive. After roasting, the beans are cracked and winnowed. Shells lift away in a papery stream while nibs fall heavier into a container. The nibs are broken pieces of cacao seed, rich with fat and flavour. You place a few on your tongue. They crunch sharply. The taste is bitter, acidic, fruity, and roasted, with no sugar to soften the message. It is cacao speaking without manners. Fascinating, but not exactly a bedtime snack for beginners. The nibs go into a grinder, often with stone wheels. Sugar is added, sometimes nothing else. Many craft makers favour simple ingredient list cacao, sugar, perhaps cocoa butter, perhaps a little vanilla, but often not. The grinder turns for hours or days, refining the particles until the texture becomes smooth. The sound is steady and low, a circular hush. The smell grows rounder as bitterness mellows and sugar disappears into the mass. You feel warmth rising from the machine, gentle and continuous. Historians and food scholars still debate whether the craft chocolate movement is a true transformation of the chocolate economy or a small premium niche that changes taste more than it changes power. Some makers build serious relationships with growers and pay higher prices. Some farmers benefit from specialty markets. Yet most cacao in the world still moves through bulk commodity systems. A beautiful bar can raise awareness, but awareness alone does not rebuild the whole chain. The uncertainty sits there, honest and necessary beside the elegant wrappers. You enter a tasting room. The table is simple, the lighting warm, the pace slow. Several bars are laid out in small pieces. You are asked not to chew immediately, which feels strict but reasonable. You place a square on your tongue and let it melt. The texture softens. Flavour unfolds in stages. First brightness, then cocoa depth, then something like cherries, then roasted nuts, then a dry finish like black tea. Another bar tastes completely different, mellow, creamy, almost banana-like, with a hint of molasses. A third is floral and sharp, surprising enough to make you sit straighter. This is the revelation craft chocolate offers. Chocolate does not have to taste only like chocolate. That familiar flavour from childhood is often a blend of cacao, sugar, milk, vanilla, processing style, and memory. But cacao itself is varied. Fermentation can shape fruity notes. Drying can preserve or damage quality. Roasting can reveal or flatten complexity. Conching can soften harshness. Every choice leaves a fingerprint. The room also smells different from a candy factory. Less sugar, more bean, more roast, more fruit, more patience. You hear wrappers folding, moulds being tapped, a thermometer set down, a grinder humming, rain ticking softly against the window. A maker breaks a finished bar and listens for the snap. The surface shines when tempering has gone well. The edges are clean. The bar looks simple, but simplicity here is earned. Craft chocolate often brings farmers into the story more visibly. Some wrappers name cooperatives or estates. Some companies share prices paid or sourcing relationships. Some invite consumers to care about fermentation, biodiversity, heirloom varieties, agroforestry, and fair compensation. Naturally, marketing can also borrow these words because attractive ethics sell nicely beside attractive flavour. The challenge is telling substance from decoration. You sit with the last sample, a dark bar from beans grown on a small farm in humid shade. It melts slowly, carrying notes of raisin, tobacco, citrus peel, and warm earth. There is no rush to swallow. The point is attention. Craft chocolate asks you to taste the road from pod to bar. Not only the sweetness at the end. Evening settles over the workshop, the machines quiet one by one. Fresh bars cool in moulds. Cacao sacks lean against the wall like travellers resting after a long journey. The air remains fragrant, calm, and slightly dusty with cocoa. In this small room, chocolate is not trying to be everywhere at once. It is trying to be specific. You leave with the taste lingering gently on your tongue. Chocolate has become intimate again, not by returning to the past, but by slowing the present. It asks for origin, labour, flavour, and attention. It reminds you that even a small square can hold a landscape, a harvest, a set of hands, and the soft surprise of discovering that you have been tasting too quickly for years. You stand in the candy aisle of the present, surrounded by a brightness so complete it feels almost unreal. Shelves rise on both sides, crowded with bars, bags, boxes, powders, spreads, cookies, cakes, cereals, drinks, syrups, and tiny wrapped pieces designed to be eaten one after another while pretending you are still deciding. The air smells faintly of cardboard, sugar, vanilla, roasted nuts, plastic wrapping, and the cool, dry breath of a modern store. Chocolate is everywhere now. It waits beside checkout counters. It appears in airport shops, hotel pillows, birthday cakes, office drawers, holiday baskets, vending machines, school lunch boxes, luxury boutiques, emergency snacks, protein bars, breakfast spreads, and late-night kitchen cupboards opened with the stealth of a raccoon wearing slippers. It is cheap, expensive, ordinary, sacred to some, guilty to others, nostalgic to many, and somehow still able to feel personal even when produced by the millions. This is the strange triumph of cacao. A tropical seed once prepared as a bitter drink in specific cultural worlds has become one of the most recognizable flavors on Earth. The mainstream historical fact is simple. An enormous chocolate today is a global industry built from cacao farming, industrial manufacturing, branding, retail, and countless local habits of consumption. It belongs to multinational corporations, small craft makers, pastry chefs, street vendors, home bakers, farmers, traders, and anyone who has ever said, "Just one more square," with the confidence of someone already lying. You pick up a simple chocolate bar. The wrapper is smooth and cool. It may show mountains, gold lettering, smiling cows, cacao pods, elegant patterns, or a brand name old enough to feel like family. You open it. Foil or paper crackles softly. The bar inside is divided into neat segments, a small architecture of permission. Break here, share here, save here. Eat the uneven corner immediately because it clearly does not count. The snap is clean. The smell rises cocoa, milk, sugar, vanilla, maybe nuts, maybe fruit, maybe nothing fancy at all. You place a piece on your tongue, and it begins its quiet work. It melts because cocoa butter softens near body temperature. This physical fact feels almost poetic, as if chocolate was designed to surrender exactly when held by a human mouth. Sweetness spreads first, then fat, then bitterness, then memory. Chocolate's global power lies partly in this intimacy. It is industrial, yet sensual. Mass-produced, yet emotional. You may know it came from a vast supply chain, but when it melts, it feels close. It can comfort grief, celebrate love, soften embarrassment, reward effort, fill silence, decorate festivals, and keep someone company at 100 in the morning when the house is quiet and the day has been rude. You move through different places in the world. In Mexico, cacao drinks and chocolate traditions continue in many forms, from spiced beverages to mold sauces where cacao deepens savoury complexity. In Belgium, pralines sit in glass cases like tiny polished treasures. In Switzerland, milk chocolate carries the memory of alpine branding and creamy texture. In the United States, candy bars became linked with convenience, childhood, cinema, and holidays. In Japan, Valentine's Day, chocolate developed its own social codes, with gifts shaped by affection, courtesy, and expectation. In West Africa, where much cacao is grown, more local chocolate production and consumption are growing, though the global value chain remains uneven. Everywhere, chocolate adapts. It becomes hot drink, cold drink, pastry, sauce, sweet, symbol, souvenir, craft object, cheap pleasure, luxury gift, and emotional punctuation. It crosses religions, languages, and class boundaries, though never equally. It can sit in a 5-star dessert under a gold leaf, or melt in the pocket of a child walking home from a corner shop. The same flavour family stretches across enormous differences. A quirky modern tidbit rests in your hand. White chocolate contains cocoa butter, but no cocoa solids, which is why people argue about whether it is real chocolate, with the passion normally reserved for constitutional crises. Legally and culturally, the answer depends on definitions, ingredients, and personal stubbornness. It may not taste like dark cacao, but it belongs to the chocolate family through cocoa butter. Whether your heart accepts it is your private legal system. Historians still argue whether chocolate's modern popularity should be understood mainly as a result of taste, stimulant chemistry, sugar and fat, emotional marketing, colonial history, childhood memory, or social ritual. The honest answer is that chocolate became globally powerful because all these forces joined hands. Cacao brings bitterness and aroma, sugar brings pleasure, fat brings texture, theobromine and caffeine bring a gentle lift. Advertising brings dreams. Memory brings loyalty. Culture teaches when to give it, crave it, hide it, praise it, or blame it. You pause beside the shelves and notice the contradictions. Chocolate is associated with comfort, yet its production can involve poverty and exploitation. It is sold as happiness, yet many farmers struggle to earn a stable living. It is marketed as natural, yet much of it is highly processed. It can be luxurious, yet cheap versions are available almost everywhere. It is ancient in origin, yet modern in form. It is simple to eat and difficult to explain. The sound around you is ordinary wheels of carts, distant checkout beeps, soft music from ceiling speakers, the rustle of bags, no temple drum, no palace whisper, no factory thunder, yet the old echoes remain. Hidden inside the wrapper, a cacao pod growing in shade, a clay cup lifted with care, beans counted in a market, a ship crossing rough water, a machine grinding through the night, a farmer turning beans beneath a hot sky, a child pressing a face to a shop window, a soldier breaking a ration in the cold, a maker tasting one square very slowly. You step outside into evening, the air is cooler now. Streetlights glow on wet pavement. Somewhere nearby, someone opens a chocolate bar. Somewhere far away, cacao flowers wait on the trunk of a tree, tiny and pale, needing small insects and good weather. Somewhere, beans ferment under leaves, warm and fragrant. Somewhere, a factory line runs. Somewhere, a person chooses a box as an apology, a celebration, a flirtation, or a small mercy. Chocolate has become global addiction, but not only in the crude sense of craving. It is an addiction to sweetness, yes, but also to story, to comfort, to memory, to the idea that something small, dark, and melting can briefly gather the world into one bite. And now the aisle fades. The wrappers grow softer in your mind. The bright shelves drift away, replaced by leaves moving in warm night air. You breathe slowly. The scent of cacao becomes gentler, less like a store and more like earth after rain, like smoke from a distant hearth, like a cup held between careful hands. The long road of chocolate settles into stillness. No need to follow every ship, every market, every machine now. Let the pods hang quietly in the shade. Let the beans dry under a patient sun. Let the cup cool on the table. Let the final square melt without hurry, sweet at the edges, bitter at the centre, soft as sleep. The forest grows dim. The world grows quiet. Your breath slows with the leaves, with the rain, with the old dark seed resting in the palm of history.